Hey everybody, welcome to Kent with Bent number 149, No Election Talk. Bent, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing alright. So, I feel like before we actually get into this, we need to talk about what it means to have this No Election Talk stream. So, for those of you who might not know, maybe you're not American, maybe you're from the future, I don't know. Today is November 5th, 2024, which is the date of a general election here in the United States for multiple federal offices, most importantly being the President of the United States. Here's what that means for us today. This is a break from the wall-to-wall election coverage that is happening virtually everywhere today, in the United States at least, and also to some extent in other countries, because a lot of countries care about what happens in the US, because US policy affects basically everyone. But since there's nothing any of us can do about it at this point, because you've either already voted or polls are about to be closed in most places, so if you're here, chances are you either haven't done anything about it or you've already done everything you can, which means there's no point in worrying about it, which means we're not going to worry about it here. We're going to take a break, which means that you in the chat, if you mention anything to do with election results, election candidates, or anything else that comes too close to being election related, it's going to be a timeout. It's not a bannable offense. It's fine. You're welcome back after the timeout is done. And if you just keep getting timed out, that's fine too. It is absolutely never going to be bannable. This is for my mods here. Do not ban people for election talk. However, if you do election talk, I expect my mods to ban you, or not ban you, sorry, to time you out. And if you keep doing it, to time you out for ever increasing amounts of time. Now, if there are any questions about that, please ask very soon, because very soon those questions might become dangerous if they make too much mention of various election-y stuff. So, that is what that means. We are not doing election talk. We are going to be doing Kent with Bent, where we look at the nonsense from Kent Hovind, along with Bent Hovind, no relation, Kent Hovind's not nephew. So, that's what we're doing today. And we are doing it as a bit of a drinking game, which we normally do. Now, I know a lot of people are already drinking tonight anyway, but, whatever. I feel like tomorrow is going to be the most hungover Wednesday in years, but that's okay.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, probably. I know that it's all the science friends are doing right now is drinking an election talk, but that's not what I'm doing right now. So, with that being said, if you feel like you can't avoid the election talk, that's fine. Just go watch some election coverage, or just sit away from where you can type into chat. That is absolutely fine. Roachina is rock shaped like dill pickle Keller for $1.99 says fish fingers and custard. You know, here's the thing. There are savory custards, and I've tried fish fingers with a savory custard, and it's actually really good.
Oh,
But
really?
pudding custard cup is not going to be very good. So, yeah. Because, I mean, custard it's mostly egg yolk, right? And you can make that savory. Just make a savory custard. It's fine. Don't add a bunch of sugar and vanilla and whatnot. Let's see. Kent Bohemian I can't talk. Kent Bohemian... I'm going to get this right. I'm going to get it. Kent Bohemian Devonian Denisovan Halstead, who's been a member for 5 months and is at the amniote level, says, "Good morning and welcome to the Black Mesa Transit System. This automated train is provided for the security and convenience of the Black Mesa research." And then it just kind of cuts off. Thank you very much for that Half-Life reference. I do appreciate it. Alright, so what are the drinking rules for this? Well, we're going to take a drink anytime Kent says something that's so stupid we just kind of have to cool our brains off, which happens pretty often. Which, by the way, Bent, what are you drinking today?
I'm drinking the wonderful Mountain Dew Baja Blast,
Nice.
available in grocery stores through the year.
I am drinking a gin and tonic with a fancy gin and a a fancy tonic and a bottom shelf gin. Because I find that the tonic is almost as important as the gin. If I want to class up my gin and tonic, it's cheaper to class up the tonic than it is to class up the gin. So that's what I'm doing. My Unfinished Journey for $2 says cider donuts and cider donut cider. Nice. That is an interesting combination. Right, so we will also take a drink if Kent Hovind gets something right, that's factual. Now, it can't just be something he's reading out of a book or that he plays a clip of or something. It actually has to be in his brain, and he has to express it himself with his own vocal apparatus. If that happens, we will take a drink for Kent Hovind getting something right. We'll also take a drink if Kent Hovind tells a story that didn't happen or tells a joke that didn't land. Now, those are a bit of a judgment call, especially with the story. But basically, if it sounds like it should be posted on r/that happened, yeah, we're going to take a drink for it. We're also going to take a drink anytime Kent Hovind, mentions that political party from the 1930s and 40s in Germany that was very popular there and very unpopular in most other places. Although, not all other places, because it turns out that this year's Madison Square Garden fascist rally wasn't the first fascist rally in Madison Square Garden. That one actually had explicit German fascist rhetoric and symbology. Yes, I know it's simple. So it's good to be reliving that. That was sarcasm. Anyway, that was me coming close to breaking my own rule. So we're gonna move away there. Let's see. We will also take a drink anytime Kent Hovind, or anytime Bent or I successfully predict what Kent Hovind's going to say. We'll take a drink for that. We'll also take a drink if Kent Hovind mixes up what we can know about Lucy, the Australopithecus afarensis, with what we can know about any wider taxon to which she belongs, based just on her skeleton. So, for instance, if he says, "Well, we don't know if Australopithecus had human-like feet because we don't have Lucy's feet," we call that an ad hominid. We'll also take a drink if Kent Hovind cites a source, we check that source, and not only does it fail to support him, which is almost guaranteed, if it actually actively contradicts him, that's called Trojan source. Let's see. I feel like I am missing a fair few, Bent. I feel like my mind is scattered. What am I missing from the ones that Kent can cause?
Did you mention a joke that doesn't land? I can't remember.
Yes, I did. All right, well, there's probably none of those then. We will also take a drink for some things that you guys can do. For instance, if any of you guys type in a super chat or membership milestone chat and send it that has anything to the effect of Answers in Genesis is a bag of dicks or AIG, we'll take a drink for that. Be careful, you can't just type in AIG as a bag of dicks. YouTube censor that. You have to be clever with it. We will also take a drink if anyone super chats or membership milestone chats anything with any of the Godzilla kaiju emojis, which includes Godzilla, Mothra, and King Ghidorah. Also, Mothra or Godzilla may come by audibly. We'll take drinks for that. We'll also take a drink for each gifted membership up until the 20 mark. After the 20 mark, when you start hitting the 50 mark, I'm just going to down the rest of this, go get a new drink, and we're going to continue on. Let's see. Also, if I screw up the production of this, so for instance, if I come back from a break and I leave Bent muted or something like that, that'll be Dapper's a professional. Now, if it's just technical difficulties that happen as a result of a program crash, loss of internet connectivity, YouTube servers going down, things like that, those are not me, and those are not Dapper's a professional, because that's just technology out of my hands breaking down. Which I think means that we have covered all of them. If we haven't, I will let you know as we do. And there you go. So before we get into this, though, and we start the drinking game, I do want to let you know that you need to be careful, pace yourself, know your limits. Absolutely do not play this game and then go out, drive a car, operate heavy machinery, fly an airplane, text your ex. None of those are good ideas. Don't do them. If you do, Dapper Dinosaur Channel takes neither responsibility nor liability for any of your choices as a result of playing this game. This is, in fact, a play at your own risk game. So be careful out there. Now, with that being said, Bent, I'm not going to ask if you're ready. I'm going to ask, would you be more ready in the next minute or so?
I'm as ready as I'll ever be.
All right. Well, then, let's do this. And remind me, guys, if any of the audio levels are a little off, let me know, because for some reason, OBS has been, inconsistent with audio levels lately. Oh, Silu, who's been a member for 20 months. Oh, no, I've got a few to read. First, Roshan, a rock-shaped like dill pickle Keller for $9.99 says, I just lost 5 hours of gameplay in Final Fantasy II after the game crashed because I neglected to save because I was grinding levels and it was impossible to get a game over. Gah. I need another key to success. I know that pain. Last week, I was after hours, after I was done working on videos and whatnot, I went to go do some work on a animation for the Star Trek game, Star Trek Adventures, Star Trek Lexington. And I lost 5 hours of character creation as a result of Blender crashing, and it destroying not one, not two, but 3 different backup saves were all corrupted somehow. As well as 2 other backup saves from a different part of the animation on a different file. So...
That's awful.
Yeah, it was horrible.
That's just
so I feel you. It really is. It's... Yeah. I couldn't believe it when I checked all 3 backups and none of them worked. I was just like, oh, this is not great. All right, and then Silu, who's been a member for 20 months, says AIG equals Nesta Slytherin, One-Eyed Serpent of Mount Crotch. take a drink for that. Thank you very much. All right, well, without further ado, here we go.
Africa was shrunk 35 to 40% in area.
Okay, so he is now talking about the Pangaea idea. Kent Hovind thinks that you had to shrink Africa in order to get it to fit. Here's the thing. Kent Hovind only thinks that because his only basis for looking at Pangaea and trying to fit the continents is by cutting them out of a Mercator map. If you want to cut continents out of a Mercator map, then sure, you have to do funky things. But it turns out if you do it on a globe, nope, it's just fine. It's literally just Kent Hovind being as good at using maps as the average flat earther. Which is why I maintain that Kent Hovind is not a globe earther for any evidentiary reason. He is a globe earther only because flat earth wasn't popular when he was learning his creationism. If it had been popular, he would absolutely be a flat earther right now. And I've seen him try to defend the globe. He's really bad at it. All he has is insults of flat earthers, which, I mean, to be fair, they deserve. Nothing that he said that was insulting to flat earthers was wrong. It's just that pointing out that flat earthers are really, really stupid doesn't actually argue against the flat earth. Kent Bohemian, Devonian, Denisovin, Halstead for $1.99 says Africa was in the pool. yeah, you gotta watch out for shrinkage when you're coming out of the pool. It's a real phenomenon, not just made up. All right, here we go.
To make your drawing. Mexico and Central America are completely gone. Here's a map of Pangaea from McGraw-Hill Earth Science, 1973. Where is Mexico?
It doesn't exist. Not all of the land that is currently above water has always been land that is above water. I mean, that's just a fact. I don't know what else to tell you, right? There has not always been the same amount of land as there is now. And by that, I mean even like continental crust, right? Like continental crust can be produced and can go away. So like, I'm sorry that you don't understand that geology is a thing, Kent, but it is. I don't know how else to say that, right? Like, we know that not even that long ago, geologically speaking, like a few million years ago, like the Isthmus of Panama didn't exist. That's why until very, very high in the fossil record, don't get a whole lot of overlap between the fauna of North and South America, right? Like, why were there no big cats in South America until, like, was it like 5 or 6 million years ago? I mean, obviously, when they got to South America, they absolutely dominated. That's why the top predator in South America right now is the jaguar. So, where were they before that? Why was the landscape dominated by terror birds? Oh, it's because there was no real faunal exchange between those two. Why were there no, like, opossums or raccoons or armadillos in North America until 5 or 6 million years? It's the same reason, right? Because those are South American animals that moved north after the land bridge formed. So, yeah, it turns out they just didn't exist. Now, this particular map does cut off most of Eurasia, which I don't know why it does that, but I don't know. What is this from? 1973? Okay, yeah, I guess in 1973, maybe we didn't know what the deal was with the rest of Eurasia. Way to stay up to date, Kent. And remember, these videos were at least made in the 90s, so this map was already some 20 years old when Kent was using it, which is already kind of iffy. Get more up-to-date publications. Got a couple things to read here. Ray El Gatubello for $5 says, even the AIG bag of dicks accepts Pangaea, even though they can disregard the earlier supercontinents. Yeah, that is generally their position. I have heard things that made me think that maybe they think that the pre-flood world was Rodinia, which is a previous supercontinent, that then broke up into Pangaea under the flood, and then broke up into the modern arrangement of continents, all during the flood, which is a lot of tectonic activity under the flood. But yeah, I have heard hints about that, but I don't know if that's their official position. I think what I mostly hear from them, Pangaea, is the erosion of rock shapes like Bill Pickle Keller for $4.99 says, Kent doesn't understand that continental crust can erode at the coasts. Yeah, which seems really obvious, like, if you've ever, I don't know, been to the coast. Because, like, there's usually a pretty obvious erosion going on there. Like, I don't know. And have you ever been to the coast?
I've been to more than one coast.
Did you ever notice any, like, erosional features while you were there?
Yeah, it was kind of weird. I just thought it was a coincidence.
No, as it turns out, it's not just a coincidence. It's actually a real phenomenon. Yeah,
Wow.
I know, right? Also, for some reason, I see you as being a lot quieter than I am, so I'm going to turn you up a little bit.
Okay.
All right, here we go.
You can get any textbook that shows Pangaea and just state, where's Mexico?
I do have to point out that even on this map, the northern parts of Mexico are actually there. Like, look, there's Baja California right there. That's part of Mexico, Kent. Part of this is also just that Kent doesn't know where Mexico is. So I'm going to take a drink for Kent just not knowing where Mexico is. Because, yeah. What am I, like 2 hours drive away from Mexico right now?
About that, yeah.
Okay. But it's not really a part of Mexico I want to go to. That's the problem.
Where's all of Central America?
It didn't exist.
I mean, I've been to most of those, or many of those countries, flown over all of them.
Do you think Kent knows that right now, like today, he could go to a spit of land in the Hawaiian Islands that didn't exist when he was born?
No.
Like,
There's no way he.
Yeah.
There's no way he knows that.
Because that's the thing, right? There is now a new Hawaiian island that didn't exist when Kent was born. What's on it? I mean, basically nothing. Some hardy plants and lava crickets. But, like, it's there. It's going to get bigger over the years. And, yeah, that's a thing. Now, is it the same process? No. But, I mean, it just is the basic idea that, yeah, it turns out, as a matter of fact, that sometimes new land comes to exist and old land goes away. Dutch Tunicate Demonic Selection for $5 says, even in Minnesota, we have large lakes that have massive waves that you can watch erode the coast. That sounds like double talk right now, and I do not believe you, sir. Or madam. I don't actually know. Roshina, rock-shaped like Dill Pickle Keller for $4.99 says, I know every time Dapper reads my super chats, he secretly wants to say... Hold on. Well, now I do. Now that you say that out loud, or well, explicitly, I said it out loud. Dark Law Dragon, who's been a member for 27 months, says, let's see, Godzilla, Mothra, Ghidorah, and AIG are a bag of dicks, all via emojis, all in one membership chat, so thank you very much for taking a drink for that. And we will update the donations counter. Because, hey, today, for the first and possibly only time ever, Dapper Fancy Avatar, Bent has to wear a tutu next week, and Bent gets free pizza are all exactly at 100% of the value here. So,
Wow.
Yeah, they all happen to coincide this week.
Nice.
So, now, of course, if we don't hit it, they'll just keep coinciding until we do hit it. So, you know.
Some pretty good size. So they just simply take them out because it makes the continents not fit.
No, it's also because we don't have sediment or rocks from those places that go back that far. And we actually have the evidence of, like, contiguous mountain chains. Like, the Atlas Mountains in Africa, the Appalachian Mountains in North America, and the Scottish Highlands are actually one continuous mountain chain from Pangaea, the Central Pangaean Mountains, that split apart, and we don't have that continuity in Central America. So it's a combination of we don't have anything old enough to reasonably say those areas were around then, and we have evidence of them not existing based on continuous rocks that you can find on either side of what was once Pangaea. Like, think about that. You can follow a chain of ancient mountains from Pangaea across two different continents and a set of islands. That's pretty crazy, and it's a whole lot more than just like, well, the edges of the continent seem to line up a bit. That's, like, how do you conclude otherwise? It would kind of like be like, you've torn bread in half, right? Like, taking a chunk of bread, like a bread roll or something, and torn it in half.
Yeah.
And you know that if you put those halves back together, they fit reasonably neatly. Not perfectly, because, you know, there's some expansion and contraction and shearing and whatnot. But they fit together pretty well. Now, what if I came to you with two halves of a bread roll that fit together like that? And I said, it's just a coincidence that these two bread roll halves fit together this neatly. I actually tore two separate bread rolls in half each, and put the two halves from different bread rolls together, and oh my goodness, just by accident, they line up. Is that
amazing.
is that impossible? I guess not. But, like, is that really what you're going to believe? Like, that's clearly not the more likely outcome of what I'm telling you. Like, clearly what most likely happen is that I'm just lying to you about this. And that's the situation we're in, right? It's not just that there's kind of a matchup. There's like a three-dimensional matching on either side throughout a huge swath of the geological record on in like Africa versus South America, parts of North America and Europe, like the British Isles, and then also between North Africa and Southern Europe. And like that's a lot of coincidences if there was never a Pangaea.
So anything that, makes a theory not work, well, let's eliminate it. It's just not the...
No, Kent. Take a drink. We're going to talk about falsification. If the data actually preclude the hypothesis as it is currently formulated has been falsified. What you need to do is go back and either abandon or modify the hypothesis. And that's fine. But what Kent is thinking is happening is that we're like, well, we really, really like this whole Pangaea idea, so we're going to ignore contrary evidence. Here's the thing. There is no contrary evidence. There just isn't, which is why it's accepted. And also, Kent is ignoring that the shift from static continents to a Pangaea breakup as like the consensus happened during his lifetime. When Kent was a kid, no one really believed that Pangaea was going on, unless Kent is way younger than I think he is. So during his lifetime, in his memory, geologists have shifted on this question, right? If what Kent were saying is true, if geologists just ignored or dismissed or changed contrary data, they would still believe in static continents. The idea of continental drift, which later turned into the more robust plate tectonics, was not a popular idea when it was proposed, which was in like the middle of the 20th century. It took a lot of time and a lot of evidence for geologists to change their minds. So, very obviously, without any real like way to argue against it, what Kent is saying about science, that, oh, they just ignore contrary data, it's precluded by the very idea he's talking about right now. I just want that to let that sink in. Kent Hovind is shown wrong about his idea about how science works just by the very topic of this conversation. So, yeah, great job, Kent.
That's not the way science works. They also don't tell you.
Take a drink. That is not the way science works, which is why that's not the way it works in this case either, Kent. So he just said they'll also tell you.
Europe and South America were rotated counterclockwise.
Okay.
Africa was rotated clockwise.
Okay.
Notice the way they would have to twist to make them fit.
What's his objection here?
He doesn't think they can twist in different ways.
Why would he think that?
Because he has no idea what he's talking about.
Okay. Roshan, a rock shaped like dill pickle Keller for $4.99 says most of Kent's book learning seems to come from the 1920s to 1930s. That does seem to broadly be the case. So one of the things about creationists is that they're pretty consistently about 3 to 4 decades out of date with most of their like ideas about what science says and what the consensus is and what they think there's reasonable evidence for. And another thing about Kent is that almost uniquely among creationists who are like professionals, Kent he's almost incapable of learning new things. He is astoundingly bad at trying to figure out like new ideas, new data, updating his arguments. And so I do think that there's a fair chance that by the time he started learning about creationism, which I think was in like the 70s, that the 1940s might be the most recent science that he's like capable of understanding at this. It would go a long way towards explaining why in his debate with King Crocoduck, he couldn't even conceive of what the Casimir effect is and kept consistently calling it the Casimir effect. So, yeah.
South America twisted one way, Africa twisted the other way. They also don't tell you the obvious. To me, I don't know how anybody can overlook this one.
So, okay, Kent. You can't just leave... I mean, obviously you can, but just leaving it at, well, different continents twisted different ways doesn't mean anything, right?
It's not an argument.
Right. It's like, go back to my bread example. If I tore the bread into 4 pieces, and then twisted them in different directions on a plate, does that mean they couldn't have been a single piece at one point? No, you would have to give some further argument. Why can't continents twist? If they can move, why can't they rotate? And the answer is there is no answer, right? Because the propulsive force for continents moving is primarily rocks in the mantle having convection currents, right? And so convection currents, if the net effect on a continent has a difference in like force on one side versus the other of the continent, that's going to result in rotation. And there's no like rule of nature that says that the net force on all continents has to produce torque in the same direction or zero torque, which is what Kent is basically saying. He's saying convection currents in the mantle are not allowed to produce different directions of torque in different continents. And I don't know why that would be. And I don't think he could actually explain any of that. Like if I asked Kent, hey, Kent, what do you think might be the cause of torque on continental crusts on Earth? I don't know that he would even comprehend what I was saying. So, Bob Ali says, is that the quantum vacuum wave thing? I don't think so. Pretty sure that's just geology.
If you take the water out of the oceans, there is dirt underneath.
Hmm?
Isn't there?
I mean, I wouldn't call it dirt. It's a bunch of ocean sediment and mostly basalt. But I mean, there's rock and sediment. So I guess if you want to generalize that into dirt, then yeah, sure.
I mean, when you look at a world, you say, wow, this is water, this is land. Well, that doesn't mean there's nothing under the water, right?
Yeah.
I bet you could point out that the opposite sides of most rivers in the world are parallel, right?
Right, but Kent, that's because rivers are an erosional feature. No one is suggesting that the oceans eroded themselves into existence and that there's a net flow, like, down the Atlantic or something. That's... I'm gonna take a drink. This is amazingly dumb. Here's
Rivers
a quick...
are oceans, Dapper. Just accept it.
Oh, here's a quick way to tell what you're looking at as a river or an ocean. If it is a river, it will have a slope and it will flow downhill. If instead it does not have a slope and is already at the lowest point, and it has convection currents that produce currents that flow not downhill but simply laterally, then you've probably got an ocean. They form in different ways. They have different kinds of geology. They last different amounts of time. And I'm also going to point out that the coast between North and South America, between North America and Europe and between South America and Africa are not actually directly parallel because of the twisting that Kent Hovind pointed out, which doesn't usually happen with rivers. So on every single count of this, except for the most basic level, Kent is wrong. Which, I mean, no surprise there, right?
Does that prove the sides broke apart? No, it's a low place full of water. That's all it is.
Yeah, but Kent, low places full of water don't require parallel sides, right? Look at the Dead Sea, or the Caspian Sea, or Lake Baikal, or any of the Great Lakes. They don't have parallel shores on opposite sides. Those are low places full of water. So that is not a good explanation. Vandalia 1998 for $5 says, I'm late, I forgot that when the clock goes back an hour, so does the Dapper stream. So, that is not true for all of them, though. Because I have to account for the schedules of people who do observe daylight savings time, like weirdos. I do, in fact, keep the timing of Matt with Maddie and Jackson with Jackson at 6 Pacific, instead of staying at 6 Mountain Standard. So those shows go off of everybody else time to accommodate my guests. Rael Gatibello for $2 says, you forgot inland seas like the Caspian. Didn't I say the Caspian? thought I said the Caspian. I might have said the Black Sea. Well, if I forgot the Caspian, which I don't think I did, but maybe I did, I'm sorry. But yes, the Caspian Sea is another. All right, here we go.
So the continents are not floating around like lily pads in a bathtub, okay?
Actually, yeah, they kind of are. We're going to take a drink because that was a dumb thing to say. So the continents aren't floating on the water of the oceans. You couldn't swim underneath a continent and be in the water under the continent, which, by the way, is what the Bible assumes you could do, actually. Well, I mean, if you could hold your breath that long. Oh, yeah, look at the Aral Sea. Oh, it's gone, says Vadim Radchenko. Yeah. Rip the Aral Sea. I blame the Soviets, which is reasonable because they're the ones who destroyed it. Yeah, there was a Soviet land use planner who was basically like, oh, the Aral Sea? That's useless. What if we did a whole bunch of things that just got rid of it? And then, yeah, well, there goes the Aral Sea and all the life that was there, and as well as all of the villages that relied on the Aral Sea for their livelihood. Is just great. Thanks, the Soviets. All right. My unfinished journey for $6.66 says, Hail Nero, Daps, and Bent. Ken Hoven's possible reply, don't tell me someone used a giant torque wrench on Africa. Well, fortunately, I will not be telling Kent that, because that is not what happened. So, with that being said, so the continents floating around. The continents actually float on the mantle. So, over short periods of time, the mantle is essentially solid. But over long time scales, it is actually a high viscosity fluid. So, viscosity is basically a resistance to flow. High viscosity means you're highly resistant to flow. Low viscosity means you have low resistance to flow. So, for instance, everyone's pretty much familiar with water. And we usually use water as kind of our standard for viscosity because it's the most common fluid we encounter. Pure alcohol has a lower viscosity. That's why if you pour out some isopropyl, cleaning alcohol that has a really high concentration, or you pour out some Everclear or something like that, you actually can see that it spreads through things faster. Right? It's almost like it's wetter water. On the other hand, things like honey or oil or tar are much higher viscosity. They flow much, much more slowly. The mantle has such a high viscosity that if you were to take a chunk of it and hold it in your hand, presumably after you had cooled it down, actually no, because then it would just be solid. But if you could hold it in your hand without burning yourself, maybe because you have great gloves, it would act like a solid. You could crack it, you could shatter it, you could press on it, and it wouldn't deform. But over very long time period, it actually does flow. And it is, in fact, that buoyancy that determines what happens in cases like when two bits of crust meet, or how the tectonic plates are going to move, or things like that, right? Sorry. Is there going to be subduction? Is there going to be buckling? Are the plates just going to slide against each other laterally? Those are things that involve the fact that the continents actually are floating on the mantle. So when Ken says it's not like they're lily pads, well, he's right in the sense that they're not floating on the ocean, but he's wrong in the sense that they're not floating. They absolutely are floating. That's what causes continental drift, which, let's remember, can be measured in real time. So if Kent is just denying that continents move at all, I mean, we can just measure it. They are moving. They move at about the same rate that human fingernails grow, which is pretty slow. But it's not nothing, which you might know if you've ever had to clip your nails, which I'm assuming most people have had to do.
I have.
Joshua Geese just gifted 5 Dapper Dinosaur memberships. Thank you so much. Let's add 5 drinks to the counter and take 5 drinks. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. You know, it really is true. Up in the tonic really does enhance the gin and tonic, and it's way cheaper to get better tonic than it is fancy gin. So, yeah, I'm appreciating my fancy tonic and dirt cheap gin.
I'm glad you're enjoying it.
They are connected. People say, do you think the continents were once connected? I say, what do you mean? They're still connected.
Yeah, what people say when they mean that is, do you think that the continental crust was actually in connection with each other without intervening oceanic crust? Which is not the case right now. All you're doing is playing word games, and you know that, Ken. You know that that's not what people mean. Pointing out that there's oceanic crust that exists doesn't answer the question. It's just being a dick. That's it.
It's underwater.
It was a joke that
So,
didn't land. Take a drink.
They're still connected. What do you mean? Were they connected? Yeah, they still are. There are cracks all over the Earth, okay, like this Mid-Atlantic Ridge, which was just recently discovered, in the last, 30 years, I think. Some textbooks, like this textbook, says there are magnetic...
Okay. The Mid-Atlantic Ridge's discovery was one of the key bits of evidence in favor of plate tectonics, because it's literally the place where the new oceanic crust is being formed that's pushing the continents apart. Like, the idea that Kenton knows about the Mid-Oceanic Ridge, or Mid-Atlantic Ridge, and is still skeptical of the idea of Pangaea, it's a little wild. It's a little bit crazy, right? It would be like someone deciding that they're going to be a Jesus mythicist. Why? Well, because the Gospels exist. It's like, I'm sorry, but they're one of the primary reasons that anyone believes that Jesus existed in the first place. What about them makes you think that Jesus didn't exist? And it's just like, well, I mean, look at them, they're the Gospels. Like, oh, okay, cool. Fun times. It just, multiple times, just in the last few minutes, I've been baffled by what Kent is even possibly trying to get at. Kent Bohemian Devonian Denisovan Halstead for $4.99 says, so I guess the factoring of plate spreading during the internet sea cable engineering was just for funsies. So, yeah, see, that's the thing. I don't know if Kent actually does accept that the continents are moving right now. Right? Because, like you said, in order to lay undersea cables for things like telegraphs or the internet, both of which have required undersea cables, you have to account for the fact that the distances aren't going to be the same, right? You have to leave some slack, basically. So, does Kent think that was just a goof? Does Kent know that that happened? If he was told about it, would he accept it? Does he think the continents are moving now? And that's the thing, I don't know. I just don't know. It's hard to say, because normally I would say, well, yeah, he's got to know that. But with Kent, he's like underestimatable, which is not a real word, but I think you know what it means because of productive morphology.
It should be a word.
Well, maybe it will be someday.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Magnetic reversals in the Mid-Atlantic Ridge.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's cover this real quick and then take a little break here. Notice what the book says here, figure 13-8. Changes in magnetic polarity of the rock on both sides of mid-oceanic ridges reflect the past reversals of Earth's magnetic poles. This is evidence for sea floor spreading.
Yeah.
And like I tried to teach Eric for years, and he's catching on pretty good, almost always there is a built-in assumption. They tell a lie and then build a whole theory on that lie.
Okay, so Kent is going to tell us that some part of that was a lie. So let's see which part. Because, yeah, I don't know.
Dinosaurs lived millions of years ago and they're extinct. So, how did they go extinct? And they go off into their big long stories. Well, you start...
No, none of that has to do with C4. Oh, my God. Kent. Jesus. The idea that the dinosaurs went extinct millions of years ago far predates the idea of seafloor spreading. Seafloor spreading was not proposed in any way to explain the extinction of the dinosaurs. It has almost nothing to do with the extinction of the dinosaurs. We knew that dinosaurs went extinct because people looked around and didn't frickin' see them. There was no Stegosaurus wandering by. You didn't have to worry about a T-Rex attack when you stepped outside. You could go fishing and not have to worry that you were going to be harassed by a freaking pteranodon, which granted isn't a dinosaur, but they went extinct, well, okay, before the dinosaurs went extinct, but you know what I mean? They were big Mesozoic reptiles. So, here's the thing. Science is not one big conspiracy to tell you a lie about dinosaurs or evolution. Scientists do not come up with their hypotheses because some relatively unrelated field of science has some kind of evidentiary weakness. Like if you told a particle physicist, like, "Hey, could you help out with like the current problem in like I don't like the phylogenetic placement of therizinosaurs within Coelurosauria?" You know what that particle physicist is going to say? "I don't even understand what you're talking about. I'm going to go back to my particle collider." They don't care. You think the geologists who are looking at the ocean floor for like various scientific and government purposes were like, "Oh, gee, sure would be nice if we could get a more detailed explanation as to why it is that the dinosaurs went extinct by unrelatedly saying that the seafloor spread." That doesn't make any sense. They don't even connect, and even if they did, why would they be motivated to do that? Many Geeky Platypus Monks Princess for $2 says, "Dino Internet failed due to cable length issues." I mean, that was one of many reasons why the Dino Internet. So, yeah.
Started off with the wrong, the wrong lie. Okay, they didn't live millions of years ago, and they didn't go extinct. Here they start off by saying, the Earth has magnetic reversals. That's the problem.
No, they started out by saying that magnetic polarity reversals evident in the rock of the seafloor is evidence of seafloor spreading, and also reversals. Like, we wouldn't have known about magnetic reversals had it not been for rocks.
Then they say this is evidence for seafloor spreading. One of the evidences they will give you to prove the seafloor is spreading apart is magnetic reversals, and there aren't any magnetic reversals.
Just drink. Yes, there are. We're going to hear Kent go on about his idea as to what is actually happening. Yeah, he's just wrong about this, and other creationists also know he's wrong about this.
Magnetic reversal prove anyway. I mean,
Well,
even if there were,
This is Eric Hoven, in case you can't hear him very well, asking what would a magnetic reversal prove anyway. So it would demonstrate that 1, the Earth's magnetic field reverses, and that 2, that's recorded in the spreading of the seafloor, which means that seafloor spreading is real. Which we have already measured anyway, independent of this, so, you know.
that prove that it's spread.
it still wouldn't prove anything. That's a good point. See, many types of rock will store a magnetic signature, it's called. There are certain kinds of rock. I remember up in Illinois, we got a load of gravel for something my dad was building, or maybe it was out at the lake, my brother's house or something. Anyway, we noticed when you dropped nails, and you picked up nails while you're working on the house, these little rocks would stick to the nail. They're magnetic. I mean, they came out of the truck that way. The guy dumped them in the yard.
Okay, so that would be magnetite, not granite. Granite is generally not on net magnetic, Kent, but magnetite is. Why it's called that? You might have heard it in the name. Magnetite? Magnetite? No? Okay.
I'm not making the connection.
No? Yeah, it's pretty obscure. It's hard to figure out.
It's magnetite.
Oh my goodness, he got it right, even though he also said it was granite, which is not the same thing, but good job, Kent. Here's a drink for you. Cheers, man. Kent Bohemian Devonian Denisovan Halstead for $4.99 says, "Mr. Hoven knows as much about magnets as the insane clown." Yeah, magnets. How do they work? No answer is forthcoming. Although, speaking of clowns, I recently watched Terrifier and Terrifier 2. Whole different perspective on clowns. Which, don't watch those if you're squeamish. Just gonna put that out there. But the thing about those is, like, they're splatter movies, but they're splatter movies that go so over the top that they just become a parody of splatter. At least to me. I mean, it has the second one has a scene where Art literally rubs a whole bunch of salt into... Like, literally, he comes into a room with a big thing of, like, Morton salt. It doesn't have the branding on there, obviously, but, like, come on. Like, come on.
Just a naturally occurring rock. Certain types of rock, if it has any iron in it at all, it has a possibility of being slightly magnetized.
Mm-hmm. That's true. Because iron is ferromagnetic, which, you know, is also in the name. Because, you know, ferrous is Latin for iron. Ferromagnetic, iron magnet. Yeah, okay. The thing is, all these crazy fancy science words, they all actually are just very ordinarily named, but only if you know some Greek and or Latin. So.
Certain types of rock, like the lodestone, magnetite is lodestone, I believe, the same thing. You can set it on a little block of wood and set it in a pan of water, and it'll point north to you. Tell you which way is north.
I mean, it actually points north and south because it aligns to the magnetic field. But yes, Kent is right about that. That is the early way that people made compasses. They would float a small bit of magnetite or lodestone on top of a piece of wood that could support it in a bowl of water, and then it would align to the magnetic fields, would allow you a rough approximation of where north and south is. Now, you had to know which way roughly was north, otherwise you might turn it directly south. But yeah, it works. It tells you which way is north-south. Roshan, a rock shaped like dill pickle Keller for $4.99 says, once again, +1 being north, -1 being south, 0 is no charge. Magnetic field doesn't waffle between +1 and 0. Correct. I mean, it does go up and down, and presumably during a magnetic reversal, there would be an instant in time where the net magnetic field, the net magnetic dipole moment, right, would be 0. There are non-dipole elements of the magnetic field, which presumably would remain. But, yeah, the net dipole moment should go to 0, but, that's only momentary, and then it would flip, come back the other direction. Robert Madewell, who's been a member for 42 months, is at the amniote level, says, Kent takes his magnetite for granite. Oh, nice. All right, let's update the counter here. All right.
See, the Earth has this big, huge magnetic field around it,
Mm-hmm.
And these magnets will orient themselves because north seeks the south and south seeks the north. Opposites attract, except in San Francisco.
Hey, he got it right and told a joke that didn't land. That was also a bigoted joke. Hooray! We'll take 2 drinks. Never miss an opportunity to make fun of gay people, right, Kent?
But the poles of the magnet will turn, and line up with the Earth's magnetic field. And we'll get into more of the Earth's magnetic field later because there's some very interesting anomalies in the Earth's magnetic field.
Which I'm sure Kent has amazing explanations for. Such as, that's where God pushed his finger into the ground.
But nobody knows for sure what's causing the Earth. Why do we have a magnetic field?
So I will agree that we do not have a great understanding of exactly how that works. There's the dynamo hypothesis, but apparently that's had some problems with it recently. And I don't know what the current state of the research is on that. But at least when he gave this, that was pretty much true. We really didn't have a great grasp on it. And as far as I know, we still don't. If you're like a geomagnetist or something like that, I don't know. Geomagnetician? I don't even know what the word is. But if you're one of those people, and you know otherwise, please let me know. Because it's not a topic that I keep up with religiously.
I don't know anybody who's been able to give a convincing answer why we have one.
Okay, but you can't give a convincing answer as to how you know the Earth is a globe. So, I'm not really a big believer in your ability to understand what a plausible reason for anything is. Just...
The fact is, we do have one, okay? That is one of the things that causes the northern lights. I've only gotten to see them twice. 3 times, I think. How many times have you seen them? That one time in?
Twice. First time in South Dakota, both times in South Dakota.
Both times in South Dakota. Occasionally, the northern lights are visible clear down, here. It's real rare.
Can't you also smoke northern lights? Isn't that a thing?
Northern Lights Cannabis Indica?
Yeah, I hear that that's a thing.
Mm-hmm. That's a thing.
Okay.
But generally, around the polar regions, the sky just lights up, and it's the most incredible. How many of you ever seen the northern lights? Becky, where did you see them at?
Okay, here we go. We gotta ask a question. We have to add a poll. Start a poll. Here we go. Have you seen the northern? Well, I'm going to add or southern lights. All right. Yep, there we go. Because remember, as a general rule, when Kent asks his audience a question, I ask my audience. Now, granted, most of the time it doesn't actually matter very much. Whatever. It's just interesting to know how many of my audience have seen either the Aurora Borealis or the Aurora Australis. I just like to know. And if you have seen them and you have a cool story, put it in the chat. As long as it doesn't involve any kind of debate talk. No debate talk.
In Pennsylvania?
I meant election. I don't know why I said the word debate. English is my first language, by the way, in case anyone is wondering. Ugh, I should just switch to Klingon.
Man.
Maybe.
The magnetic field of the Earth deflects radiation in around the poles, and you get the northern lights, aurora borealis, and the southern lights, aurora australo... Some Latin guy, he's probably dead by now, but...
Oh my god, Ken, I was going to take a drink for you getting it right, but now I have to take a drink for you being incredibly dumb. It's Australis, and that's just Latin for southern. It's not named after a guy. What? Does Ken think everything is just named after a guy?
You might.
So aurora literally means dawn. Aurora borealis means the dawn from the north, and aurora australis means the dawn from the south. Why are they called that? Well, because they're lights from the sky that kind of mimic dawn in directions dawn doesn't normally come in, which would be east. To be fair, though, his explanation as to how this works is generally true, yeah. The magnetic fields do direct charged particles to the north and southern, magnetic poles, which come in as highly charged, interact with the atmosphere, causing ionization of the upper atmosphere, which itself is now going to start glowing with colors characteristic based on what chemical is becoming, or what molecule, or atoms, I suppose, are becoming ionized in the upper atmosphere by these high energy charged particles. So, yeah, his basic explanation is correct. And you could tell he was trying to say Australopithecus, which is also just means southern ape, right? With the same australis as like the same root word, Australopithecus, southern ape. It's like aurora australis, southern lights. Yeah.
He named it that. Australis. Aurora Australis. I used to know.
Nope, it's not Australis, because Australia is the southern place. The ya place is like a suffix in Latin that kind of basically means like a place. You see it in like Germania, or what we now call Germany. Britannia for the British Isles. Yeah, it's just a Latin suffix that basically means that place. It's like the Sanskrit suffix stan, which means the same thing, like Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Afghanistan. But that's Sanskrit.
I'm learning so much.
Are you?
A little bit, yeah.
Okay, cool. I like that. I like to be educational, even for my co-hosts. So yeah, it's the same idea, right? A lot of languages have a little suffix or some other morpheme that you can tack onto a word to mean the place of whatever the other stuff is. So Australia is just the southern land, the southern place. Australis means, southern.
All that stuff. It doesn't matter. Anyway, named after Australia, the southern part.
Nope, it's not named after Australia. They're both named after the very concept of South Kent. Jeez. I need to take a drink. I just can't not. The thing is, he could just look this up, right? Nothing about the correct answer is a problem for Kenthoven or creationism or anything like that. He could just get it right. But for some reason, Kent opts not to. And that is the baffling part for me. Just don't do that, Kent. Just get it right on the things that don't matter, right? Because I know Kenthoven, in order to maintain his beliefs, has to be wrong about certain things, right? Like, he has to be wrong about hominins. He has to be wrong about dinosaurs, about chemistry, about relativity. He has to be wrong about pretty much anything in geology. But he doesn't have to be wrong about etymology. Nothing about etymology is going to be a problem for you, Kent. Get etymology right. But no, he's not going to do that either. He's just going to be wrong about everything.
So there's a ring around the North Pole, and from satellites, or from space, they can see it. You can see the sky lighting up like a ring.
Well, it's not the North and South Pole, it's the North and South Magnetic Pole. And those aren't where the North and South Pole are, but close.
Same kind of effect you get in a fluorescent bulb. If you look at a fluorescent light bulb, there's a little bitty wire at each end, and the electricity is making all of the gas in there light up. It fluoresces.
No. Okay. So, that is not how a fluorescent light works, exactly. So he is right that you do have a conductor at either end. What you have in the middle is actually a little bead of mercury. And what you have coating the fluorescent light bulb is actually fluorescent paint, which is painted on the outside. So what happens is, first you have what's called a starter. The starter is a little capacitor, which basically steps up the voltage like crazy, right? And so it will try to keep the current going across that. Now, what that does, actually, it doesn't keep the voltage up like crazy, sorry. It increases the current across that area. Whatever, doesn't matter. So what that does is it flash vaporizes the mercury. So the mercury is now a cloud inside the fluorescent light. That mercury itself carries the charge through the fluorescent light bulb. Now, if it's on AC, it's going to be going back and forth vibrating. If it's on a DC, it can still carry the current. Wait, no, can it? I don't remember. I don't remember if you can run an AC or a fluorescent light off of DC. I think maybe now you can, now that I think about it, maybe you can't. Doesn't matter. So it vaporizes the mercury, right? Now, what's inside, the gas that's actually inside there is an inert gas that is not going to fluoresce. So I think it's usually xenon, but I don't remember. The only reason it's there is so that the mercury doesn't tarnish. Because if the mercury tarnishes, it won't be able to carry the charge as well. Because like a mercury oxide isn't going to work. You need it to actually be the liquid metal. Now, that right there is going to give off a lot of photons that are going to hit the fluorescent paint. Now, the fluorescent paint has this thing where, because it's fluorescent, when it gets excited, it gives off photons in particular wavelengths, which are not the same wavelengths as what the mercury is giving off. You couldn't see the photons that the mercury is giving off directly, which is why you use the fluorescent paint to bring it into the visible spectrum. Then that glows. It is not the gas on the inside, it is the paint on the inside surface of the glass. That's also why you're not supposed to just throw fluorescent lights out in the trash or break them, because they have mercury in them. Don't do that. However, you might be in the Navy, and it might be the case that if you want to get rid of fluorescent lights that are unbroken, you have to go through the whole hazmat disposal procedure, which is a whole long and hassly thing. Whereas, if you want to turn in broken lights, because the mercury has already escaped, now you can just put them in the regular trash that just goes overboard. Which means maybe you have secret light bulb crash smashing parties so that you don't have to deal with the onerous hazmat disposal regulations. I'm not saying that's ever happened on board the USS John C. Stennis. I'm not saying that it ever happened. I'm just saying maybe it could happen. You know.
The charge from the sun's particles is causing the atmosphere to fluoresce. And it's the most incredible sight. And if you've never seen it, you really need to go somewhere and see the Northern Lights. It's like, wow.
I'll agree with you there. We'll take a drink.
And watched it, for an hour? And we kept we're talking to Mom on the phone saying, oh, you got to see this. You can't see it through the phone.
Yeah, that sounds really annoying.
It's a little hard to videotape, I think. Maybe not, but...
It actually is. So one of the things is that it's fairly faint, and while your eyes are really good at picking out differences in light in low light conditions, most optical hardware is less good at it, especially if it's consumer grade. And so that's one of the reasons why it is in fact pretty hard to capture a good image of the auroras with consumer grade optics. Not that it's impossible, and of course, consumer grade optics are always improving, and so what is now consumer grade would have been professional grade a few not that long ago. So it's less the case now, but yeah, it has historically been the case that it's hard to capture the aurora on camera. Kent Bohemian Devonian Dennis Oven Halstead for $4.99 says, Mr. Hovind seems like the kind of guy who wouldn't rewind before returning the tape. I have to agree with that, yeah. In case any of you remember the Be Kind, Rewind idea, yeah, Kent would not have followed that. For those of you who are babies, who don't remember VHS, the way VHS works is that there's a magnetic tape, and it actually has the video just along the length of the tape. And so to play it, you actually have to put it into a machine that puts gears into little slots in the tape, and it turns it. And that moves the magnetic tape across a sensor, which then reads the information on the tape. Which means that when you're done with the tape, all the magnetic tape has gone from one end to the other. And to play it again, you have to reverse the process, which is why most VCRs had this function called rewind, which allowed you to reverse the direction of the magnetic tape. And you could even display it as it was going. The video and the audio would go backwards. And it was usually faster than the speed at which you normally played. that you could rewind quickly. And when you went to a video rental store, which is like Netflix, but you had to pay every time you want a movie. So I guess it's kind of like Amazon Prime where, you rent a movie. Except they physically give you a piece of plastic that has the physical tape. And they asked you to rewind the video before you returned it. You didn't have to. There was technically no penalty. But it was kind of like putting the shopping carts away. Sure, the company will do it for you. But I'm going to judge you based on whether or not you do that. So, but, that wasn't a long time ago. The long before. That was, basically around the same time as, why not hatch, the time of the dinosaurs. So don't worry about that too much.
There's not a lot of light out there. But it's just all different colors and stuff like that. Who cares? But anyway.
You do, Ken.
This
You
magnetic
clearly
field
do.
Causes the northern lights, causes the southern lights, causes the compass to point north on your car. And here they are telling the kids this magnetic field has reversed. Now, in an electric motor...
Why does he always say they're telling the kids? This is just the consensus in science. They're telling the adults, too. Maybe it's because he has this really big concern over, education. Because one of Ken's things is, and he's not wrong, is that if you get people to learn things as kids, they're less likely to, rebel against that information later on in life. Which is true, right? There's a reason why the best predictor for religious affiliation is the religious affiliation of your parents, right? Clearly, if everyone came at every religious affiliation possibility, as a blank slate, without any prior information from, authority figures like parents or teachers or ministers or priests or rabbis or imams or whatever, it's pretty obvious that a whole bunch of people would probably end up with different religious affiliations than what they actually have in real life. So, he is right about that. But also, when he says they're trying to tell the kids, it makes it feel like they're not telling the adult that. And that's just wrong and weird. Pushing a rock shaped like Dill Pickle Keller. For 199 says, I still make sure to rewind my DVDs from Redbox. Yes. Thank you. It's much appreciated.
Electricity running through a wire creates a magnetic field. Or a magnetic field creates electricity running through the wire.
Well, in that case, you actually have to move the magnetic field. It's a moving magnetic field can induce a voltage, which, depending on the setup, may then create a current. If there's a path for the current, right? If it's just an open, it's a solid hunk of metal, you're not really going to get a current. If you have a circuit, then yeah, okay, that's true. But it's a moving magnetic field. If you put a hunk of metal in a static magnetic field, you're not going to induce any net voltage. So there's that.
Either one. If you wrap a wire, a big coil of wire, hook a gauge to both ends of the wire, just wrap it around and around and around, and wrap it around a magnet,
okay,
and then pull the magnet out real fast. And your gauge will go...
Yeah, that's true.
It creates electricity. A magnet moving through a coil creates electricity.
So it is important that it's relative motion, right? Because remember, there's no such thing as objective stillness or motion. So, yep, Kent is right about that.
Well,
Do you have a round magnet just spinning?
that's what power plants are.
No way.
Huge magnets spinning inside a coil of wire.
Okay, so it's usually not like a big fixed permanent magnet. What's usually happening is that you have two sets of coiled wires around a magnetically conductive core, and then usually residual magnetism is enough to start up a generator. There's not usually like a bar magnet inside a generator. You can make a generator that way, but like at industrial scales, that's not usually how it works. But again, it's one of those things where it's like, we want to actually go into like the details of like magnetic like field and residual magnetism and like how that allows you to have a motor start up, or sorry, a generator start up without like an initial permanent magnet. Not really, I don't. So I mean, he's right at the level that you might explain it to like a fifth grader. If you wanted to use that understanding to then go into like an industrial application and actually design an industrial scale generator, no, you should not listen to Kent Hovind about that. But then again, I don't think that's his goal, so like I'm not going to complain too much, except to say that, yeah, you don't normally have permanent magnets just embedded in general. That's not normally how Asteryu, who's been a member for 19 months, I don't know what's wrong with me today, who's at the amulet level, says Aurora Borealis at this latitude, at this time of year, entirely localized to your creation museum? Yes. Can I see it? No. Thank you very much. I gotta love these Simpsons Golden Years references. Which, by the way, I love that that sketch has become one of the most memed and riffed on sketches like of all of TV. You can find all sorts of Steam Ham remixes, different languages, different animation styles. One of my favorites that I ever saw was every single shot was in a different animation style done by a different animator. And they were all stitched together, and it was really great because you get to see all these cool different animation styles from like just so many different people. And I really liked that. Get back to Kent.
Now you got to have something to keep that magnet turning. And so you have either steam or waterfall or something, okay? Any way to turn
Gerbils. They get gerbils on a wheel.
the magnet. You turn the magnet inside the coil of wire and it produces electricity. So electricity, you plug in your drill and the electricity goes through a coil of wire and that makes the magnet spin, or the magnet spinning will make the electricity. Either one, okay? They're going to say the Earth's magnetic field has reversed, though.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now, nobody knows for sure what's causing the magnetic field, and we certainly don't have a clue how it could possibly reverse.
It doesn't matter. We have evidence of the reversals, Kent. So, like, okay, think about it. Like, let's say that you were someone from a society that does not really bake, right? Which is still a lot of societies, right? There's a lot of societies out there that they cook their food over open fires, and that's it. There are even societies that don't even have pottery, right? So they cook their food on spits or sometimes on leaves, right? Where like you heat up some rocks in a fire and you put the rocks in a different pit, put a leaf on top of the rocks, and then put some water in there, and that's how you boil water. Like there's still societies like that. So imagine, Bent, that you were from a society like that, like say one of the various uncontacted groups from the Amazon.
Okay.
All you're aware of for cooking is hot rocks and open flames, and no pottery, but, you know, that still vegetables, spices, meat, you're aware of all that.
Okay.
And I bring to you a cake.
That would
there's-
be magical.
It would be magical. And you would not have any idea how I could make a cake, right? Like, it is completely beyond your experience as to how that could be a thing that is made. However, does that mean that you now have evidence to say that I can't make cakes? And that
Nope.
baking isn't a thing?
No.
No, because obviously I can make cakes, otherwise how the heck did I get you the cake?
Right.
So even if it's true that we have no idea how the magnetic field could possibly reverse, if we have magnetic field reversals recorded in rock, then we know it did happen. Regardless of our ability to understand that. That's not how logic or thinking works, Kent. You don't have to have a reasonable explanation for how something happened in order to say that it did. And we come across that all the time in life, right? Like, the very phenomenon of UFOs is something that happened that you don't have an explanation for. Now, I don't think it's aliens, but clearly people see things in the sky that they don't have an explanation for. And in some cases, that no one can find a good explanation for. Look, I've said it before. I've seen a UFO. I don't think it was aliens. I don't think it was magic. I don't think it was demons. But I just don't know what it was. Didn't look like anything I'm familiar with. To this day, I still have no idea what it was that I saw in the sky. Okay, cool. I saw a weird thing in the sky. So obviously that weird thing can exist. Because it was right there. I don't know how it can exist. I don't know how it did what it did. I don't know why it looked like it did. But it was there. So yeah, things can happen that you can't explain, and they still happened.
The magnetic field. This textbook says at the bottom, the pattern of magnetic stripes as found on the ocean on the seafloor along the mid-ocean ridge southwest of Iceland. Ages of rock are given in millions of years. Well, at the top it says, reversals of Earth's magnetic field leave a record in the form of magnetic stripes in the rock flowing out along the mid-oceanic ridges. Here's the theory. Here's how it's supposed to work. When a rock is hot, melted, really hot, like lava coming out of a volcano, if there's any iron in there, or anything that's capable of being magnetized, it's just flowing around like water, but the magnetic field of the Earth is going to try to pull it in line. And as the rock cools off, it ends up stuck there. And so this is called the magnetic signature. Like, they signed it. Okay, this is
he's
where
getting
it was
this right. Take a
when
drink.
the Earth's magnetic field got done when it cooled off. Well, then they're going to say,
Hey, we went way over time for a break. I just noticed because my drink is pretty much gone. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back, and I'm going to give a new reminder about the rules for tonight. Just in case. I don't think I've seen anyone break the rules, so I do appreciate that. And yeah, we'll be right back. Now, in the meantime, we are going to start off with a teaser trailer for this week's episode of Star Trek Adventures that is going to be happening on the 8th. Please, stay tuned for that. Go hop over to Top Hats Off. If anyone of my mods want to put in links to either the channel or to that video, go for it. All right, so we'll talk to you on the other side of this quick break. Next time on Star Trek Lexington.
Captain's Log, Stardate 5896.5. Now that we have finished repairs to the hull, engines, and sensors, the Lexington is once again ready to get back into deep space. We've been tasked by Admiral Banna Stoker to return to Kumbari 2. Apparently, strange emissions have been coming from an unexplored region on the side of the planet opposite of the Aurelian settlement, and we are to investigate. The mission has been marked as high priority and confidential. We're at warp now, and are due in the Kumbari system later today.
Kumbari 2 is a verdant M-class world full of lush vegetation and more than a few species of dangerous wildlife. Now it seems to hold a secret buried beneath its ancient surface. The crew must avoid the natural dangers of this untamed wilderness, but it would appear that they are not alone. A familiar face is also interested in the ruins, and not for simple scientific discovery. Can the crew discover the source of the strange readings and avoid being eaten, all before their rivals find the source themselves? Find out on October 25th, 2024, only on the Top Hats Off channel. Okay, we are back. Thank you for sticking with me. Hope you guys enjoyed that teaser trailer that I've definitely played more times than I've ever played any of my other teaser trailers, but that's okay. Like, I had a lot of fun animating that creature at the end, which, by the way, I did not model. I got that from Sketchfab. I believe it's in in the credits as to who modeled it. I don't remember their name. Sorry about that, Sketchfab user. So now that we're back, first, here's a reminder. The fact that this is the no election talk stream means that you are not allowed to talk about the election. In fact, I'm only talking about it now to tell you about the rules. So, to all my mods out there, remember, anyone mentions the candidates, who's currently winning in which states, what the electoral college count is right now, when polls close, any of that kind of stuff. Timeout. Automatic timeout. Don't give warnings. It's just a timeout. There's a reason this is called no election talk. This is a break from the wall-to-wall election coverage. So, now that that's out of the way, real quick, now that we're back, I want to say thank you to everyone who has very generously given super chats, who has given gifted memberships, both now and in my other streams and my other videos. I really appreciate it because it's because of you this channel can keep on keeping on. Without you, this channel would at the very least be a much, much diminished thing. We might be doing less than a video a week. And currently, we're at like 3. So, I really appreciate that. Now that being said, if you are currently not supporting financially, but you are interested in doing so, we have a number of really great ways for you to do that. Probably the best one is the Patreon. It's where I get to keep the most of the money. That starts at $1 a month. It can go all the way up to like $100 a month if you're feeling especially generous. There's also an option to go annual for a 15% discount. If you join, you get early access to my scripted videos. You get access to my Discord server that's just for paid people. And there are other perks at higher tiers. There's also the channel memberships. There's a little join button below this. You can't go annual on that, but it starts at $1.99. And then you also get the channel emojis, as well as your name goes green, and you get this cool little badge next to your name, like you can see in a lot of the people watching. If you're a mod, it doesn't go green; it stays blue, but you do get the channel badge, so that's cool. And yeah, that starts at $1.99. Like I said, I think it goes to $20. If an annual or monthly thing isn't your deal, there's also a merch store. You can see the merch shelf right below this video. If you don't like any of the merch that's on the shelf, you can still click through. There's more merch than that. There's also wish lists for both me and Bent. There's also a Bent Patreon in the description, but both those wish lists are in the description. I do want to say thank you to Alessandra, who sent me Christmas presents. I did say thank you for Christmas presents, but I didn't give a name because I wasn't sure. But I figured, you know what, if I just give a first name, I don't think anyone's going to have too much of a problem with that. So I do want to thank Alessandra for giving some very early Christmas presents. And again, if financial support isn't in the budget, which again, this should be not your priority. This is a low priority thing in your budget. This is after food, after lodging, after your kids' orphanage bills, after that. So after the mortgage on your apartment, all that stuff. Then finally, Dapper Dinosaur can come. But if that's not your thing, if you can't or just don't want to help out financially, that's absolutely fine. You do not have to. It is completely voluntary. What I would ask, though, is that you like this video, share this video around, put comments on my videos, maybe watch a few of my videos. All right, so let's get back in with Kent.
That these stripes are reversed, and that absolutely is not true. Those stripes are not reversed. There are no magnetic reversals in the ocean floor. This fellow said in Science Mag.
Except it is true, Kent. You just assert that, but you don't have any reason to say that. You're just saying, well, no. It's just nuh-uh from Kent, except, yeah-huh. Oh, Borgenpori says, don't forget sheep it. Yes, that's true. If you would like to help out for the cost of a slightly elevated electricity bill for you, one of the ways that you can help out is rendering for me. So what this will do is it will use your CPU or your GPU to produce rendered frames for the render farm I use called Sheepit. And basically the way Sheepit works is when I render frames on Sheepit, it costs me points. When I render frames for Sheepit, it gains me points. And as long as I have high points, my frames get high priority. And so if you want to help me have a high priority so that my animations can get done quickly, there's directions in the description. There's a section called How to Render for Me. You download the client, you enter the login credentials that I put in the description. That is a key. It does not give you access to my actual account. It only lets you count as me for rendering purposes. You install that program. put in the credentials, and just let it run. You don't have to do anything past letting it run. If it hangs up or something, you can restart it. But basically, it's passive. And yeah, it will use a little bit of electricity, just like anything else on your computer. Right, here we go.
Magazine, volume 204. It is clear that the simple model of uniformly magnetized crustal blocks of alternating polarity does not represent reality. A very complex way of saying, folks, it ain't true. Okay?
No, Kent, that's not what that... Oh my goodness, we're going to take a drink. We're going to look back at that.
Types are not reversed. There are no magnetic reversals in the ocean floor. This fellow said
Okay.
in Science
We're gonna
Magazine,
pause on the thing.
volume 204, it is clear that the simple model...
It is clear that the simple model of uniformly magnetized crustal blocks of alternating polarity doesn't represent reality. What do you think is the operative word there, Bent? What do you think is the most important word that we should focus in on?
Uniformly?
Yeah, I think uniformly is a good option. I would also say simple is a good option.
Simple was my other guess.
So what's actually being said? It's that it's not simple and it's not uniform as we have in our simplest models. But that's just science. The whole point of a model is that you take the complexity of reality and you get rid of anything that seems extraneous in order to come up with a simplified version of the problem that you can get a reasonable approximation of with your model. All models are wrong. Some are useful, right? No model is going to give you a perfectly accurate depiction of what's actually happening in the real world. That's why we just use a model instead of just looking at the real world for everything. But sometimes you can't look at the real world and you have to use a model. So for instance, if you wanted to say, okay, how do we build a bridge across this span with this weight capacity? Well, you could use a model that is unrealistic in some ways, but is good enough to get you an engineered bridge that will cross the span. Or I suppose you could just build bridge after bridge and test it with dummy weights. But that means you have to pay the cost for every single bridge that you build to test with the weights. That's insane. No one has the money for that. That's not how we do things. You use models. Aster Ryu for $4.99 says, what the hell is even the problem with magnetic reversals for young Earth creationism? I don't know. That is a great question, and I have no answer for you. I just do not know. So that's what modeling does. We make things simple. Nothing in the real world is that simple. And you probably experienced this in high school physics class, right? Like, Ben, I don't know, did you have a physics class in your school?
No, I went to a YEC private school.
Well, they could have a physics class. I don't know.
Sure, they could.
They could.
They didn't even have a football team. Why would they have a physics class?
I feel like physics class is more basic than football team, but I don't.
They
I guess
didn't
I
have
don't know.
either.
Okay. So if you took a physics class, one of the more common things, at least in US physics classes, as far as I am given to understand, is that you do a test, right? And you say, okay, how long will it take for a ball to hit the ground when dropped from a certain height? Okay. You have the mathematical equations, and, you just plug in the numbers, and as long as you did your math right, then it should work out. And then you test it. Okay. But in that testing, you're usually told to do things like, okay, we're going to ignore air resistance. We're going to ignore friction from the rolling on the table. We're going to ignore a whole bunch of things, right? And then you're often asked to figure out, like, how long it will take to fall and where will it hit the ground. And then you do the calculations and you check, and you're right. But you're right after ignoring real things in the real world, like friction and air resistance, which is just a different kind of friction, but whatever. How can you be right if you're ignoring friction, which is ubiquitous? It happens everywhere. Well, it's because you're not off by a significant amount, because the amount of friction you're ignoring is relatively small, so you can just ignore it. It's the same thing when you're doing, when people are like engineering aircraft and they do flight models. Flight models routinely assume things like a flat stationary Earth because you don't have to care that much about the Coriolis effect because it's not going to matter that much. They assume things like constant mass for the aircraft. Aircraft have masses that aren't constant because they do this thing called using fuel. That means that their mass changes throughout the flight. You do things like assume a rigid body because it makes the math easier, except that planes flex, right? I mean, see that if you've ever taken an airplane and had like a window seat near a wing. The wing flexes. Aircraft bodies aren't perfectly rigid. Why do we make these assumptions? It's to make it simple. And yeah, it doesn't represent reality when you get down to it. but it's close enough. That's all that Paul and Robinson are saying. Is that, yeah, the simple, uniform model of seafloor spreading resulting in perfectly mirrored blocks doesn't reflect reality, because reality is more complex than that. We don't actually expect it to be perfectly mirrored on either side. Okay, cool. That doesn't mean it doesn't happen, and it doesn't mean there aren't reversals, and it doesn't mean the reversals aren't mirrored. It means that they're not simple, and they're not perfectly mirrored. But instead, here comes Kent to say, nope, that just means the whole thing is imaginary. No, Kent, no one's saying that. Well, except for Kent. Oh, right, Roshan, a rock shaped like dill pickle Keller for 1999 says reversals are a problem for younger creationists because they all had to happen during the flood year, and if all layers were caused at once by the global flood, it's not possible for different strata to show magnetic reversal. Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think that is probably what Kent would probably say. Or at least what a more sophisticated creationist than Kent might say. Kent might not be able to articulate that clearly. All right.
Model of uniformly magnetized crustal blocks of alternating polarity does not represent reality. A very complex way of saying, folks, it ain't true. Okay?
No, it's not. It's not in the same way that if I said that, all right, modeling a falling ball being pushed from a table with a certain amount of force at a certain mass while ignoring friction is a simple, and you'll get a simple uniform answer, but it's not actually reflective of reality. That doesn't mean that your answer is just wrong or that balls don't fall off of tables when you push them. That's what Kent would like us to believe. Is that by pointing out that reality is complicated, therefore our idea about reality must be wrong if it does not take all of those complications into account at every level of the model.
What happened was the Earth's magnetic field had strong places and weak places. In some areas, as what they did is they drilled down in the floor of the ocean. Real expensive project. You got to park the boat out there and try to keep it still while you drill a hole 2 miles down underwater. And they brought up core samples and they checked the magnetic signature in these core samples. That part is done very scientifically. Okay? And they check the rock and find out it has a certain strength of magnet, because magnets are measured by their strength. Some magnets are stronger than others.
Mm-hmm. Take a drink, I guess.
They made maps of all this on the ocean floor of where the magnetic field was strong and where the magnetic field was weak. And after they got all done mapping it, they ended up with this map right here. Let me show you what they really got. I think I've got that.
You have it, Kent?
I guess it's not. I'll have to add that back in. They got kind of a tangled up mess, but it did appear to have some kind of pattern to it.
Yeah. Who'd have thought that in something as complicated as seafloor spreading with a bunch of volcanoes, that they might not be completely symmetrical on both sides? Which is all Kent is saying. Is it like, oh, well, it's not perfectly symmetrical. Yeah, no one ever expected it to actually be perfectly symmetrical. There's a correlation, though. It's consistent from all the way from the Mid-Atlantic Ridge to both coasts.
But it was stronger and weaker. Some areas were stronger, some areas were weaker, and there seemed to be kind of stripes of strong areas and strong stripes of weak areas.
No, Kent. The polarity reversed. You could physically isolate them, bring a magnet nearby, and it would align to the local magnetic field of the rocks, and you could flip that alignment as you move them across the rocks. They do get stronger and weaker, that's true, but the polarity reverses. It's not like scientists don't have a way to check for polarity. Any bar magnet will let you check for polarity. Hey, does this end of the rock attract or repel the north end of this magnet? Okay, check another bit of rock. As long as you keep consistent which orientation it had when you pulled it up out of the ocean, or you pull a chunk big enough to have multiple stripes, you can check. Hey, is the force repulsive or attractive? And it varied. This isn't rocket science. Sure, the insane clown posse might have trouble with this, but real scientists don't. Let's see. For $4.99, Roshina, rock-shaped like dill pickle Keller, says, simple uniformity presupposes a regular schedule for magnetic reversals, something that doesn't exist. And here's where Kent gets +1, 0, and -1 confused. Yes, it is where he gets that confused. Which, didn't he teach math according to him? Isn't
Only
that a thing
for
he
15
said?
years.
Only for 15 years. I feel like in 15 years of teaching math, maybe he should have figured out the difference between positive and negative numbers. And like the fact that even though the absolute value of, say, 1 and -1 are identical, that when you put them on a number line, they actually go in different spots. They don't mean the same thing. So, do bar magnets get drunk? I don't think so, but that's too bad. They really should. I mean, especially given that name.
A weak magnetic signature. Well, some guy drew a line through the middle, which is the average, and said everything below average is a reversal.
Citation freaking needed, Kent. Who did this? Where? In what publication? Because basically what Kent is saying is that decades worth of research on ocean sediment, or ocean geology, is just full of lies that either everyone is perpetuating or no one double checked. And when I say everyone, I mean you as a creationist could fund an expedition out there. Maybe Kent couldn't personally, but as I say fairly frequently, if creationists can get tens of millions of dollars together to make a boat-shaped building that's mostly concrete, built in the middle of nowhere, they can get a few million or a few $100,000 together to drill some freaking rocks out of the ocean, right? Or to do other kinds of research. So Kent, get it going, right? Stop whining about the fact that you need a pardon, which, by the way, is an admission of guilt, Kent. Kent still wants a pardon. Last I heard, he actually wanted, this is me breaking the rule just a little bit, he was hoping that maybe, if one of the candidates in particular won, that person would pardon him. Apparently still not realizing that pardons involve, you admitting that you're guilty. So, yeah. Instead of whining about that pardon, or trying to pretend that, like, you can sue your son in sovereign citizen court and that he has any obligation at all to respond to that, what if you use that energy to, I don't know, just do some research, do some science, right? Like, this is called creation science evangelism. I see the creation part. I kind of see the evangelism part. Hey, you could start doing the science part, Kent. Like, literally, get a boat, get some drilling equipment, get a magnet, see what happens. Publish it. Show everyone they were wrong.
And that's where the mistake was. Just because it's below average doesn't mean it's reversed.
Okay, it is true that just because something is below average, it doesn't mean it's reversed. And that the center point of this sine wave idea that he's showing us can indeed be high enough or low enough that it doesn't reverse across the it doesn't go across the zero plane, right? Or the zero line, right, on the y-axis. But that doesn't mean it doesn't. In this case, it does. And if you want to say it doesn't, Kent, you either need to go find that as a thing in the real world yourself, or need to actually show where someone else found it. Because all Kent is saying is like, well, they found a signal of higher and lower strength, which is true. And so because sine waves can be anywhere on the graph, maybe it's not reversals, except that it is, Kent. They checked that. The magnetic alignment goes from one direction to the other, and in the middle, there's a single spot where there's no net alignment. My unfinished sock for $2 says, use your magnetically striped socks to like and share. Yes, please. It is, in fact, very helpful if you guys like and share. It is a big deal. Oh.
If we lined up everybody in Pensacola and found out the average height was 5'6",
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean everybody 5'5" is reversed?
No, but if what you actually found was that half of the people were actually standing upside down, maybe you might express that in negative numbers, Kent. Maybe you might. All right, Roshina, rock shaped like Dill Pickle Keller has just gifted 5 Dapper Dinosaur memberships. Thank you so much. Let's take 5 more drinks. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, here we go.
Or are they just less than average? They're not down in the ground, okay? They're just less than average. And
yes, Ken, we all get that you can have numbers that are below average and aren't below 0. You have to show that that's the case here, right? Pointing out that that's how math works doesn't help because you haven't established that that's how it works here. And I agree. It's a possibility that you could have a mid-Atlantic ridge that has a oscillation in field strength, or well, amount of alignment in the rocks, and the amount of alignment is proportional to field strength when the rock's cooled. Yeah, that's a thing that could happen. But you have to show that that's actually what happened. Because everyone who's looked has said that that's not what's happening. And it is in fact reversals. So do you have a source for it not being reversals, Kent? Like, this is where Kent is at. Like, some of his lowest level is just his nuh-uh. Normally, he at least pretends that he has some kind of a source, right? Like we saw earlier. He cited a guy saying, well, the simple uniform model isn't reflective of reality, and I'm paraphrasing. Okay, cool. He cited someone for that. Why can't you do that here? And we all know the reason, right? Like, do you know the reason why he can't cite anyone, or why he doesn't cite anyone here?
Oh, he doesn't know how. Can't think of anyone.
Yeah, he can't think of anyone, because there is no one. Because no one has ever actually found that. It's just that he wishes they had, because it would be convenient for him if they had, and because he just believes, basically, that anything that's convenient for him is probably true. He just goes with it. Which, by the way, is the same basic idea behind Jesus' mythicism. It's mostly believed by people who just think it would be convenient for them if Jesus never existed. Don't be like Kent Hovind. If you're a mythicist, you're at least a little bit like Kent Hovind.
The low places on this sine wave are not reversed. They're just lower than average. So, make that a quiz question. Are there any magnetic reversals on the ocean floor? No, there aren't. There are no magnetic reversals, only areas of stronger and weaker magnetism. We'll take a little break. When we come back, we'll explain why, though, they keep teaching the Earth's magnetic field is reversing and the seafloor is spreading. Now, the seafloor may be spreading. I'm not questioning that. But it's very important that why they teach that. We'll cover that right after the break.
We're not taking a break. He is. We're sticking around. In case anyone was wondering. Oh, hey, we got Ambi carcinogistics. Oh my goodness, I remember the carcinogistics line. Oh, that was certainly a thing that was said by a creationist. So Ambi carcinogistics Z, who's at the tetrapod level and has been for 7 months, says creationists offer proof challenge level impossible. It really is. But at least sometimes they pretend that they have a citation that works, right? Oh, I just turned off the donations accidentally. That was a misclick. So you know what that means. We Drink for Dapper is a professional. Yeah, so you are correct, MBZ. It is more or less impossible for them to ever offer actual proof. Or evidence is probably the better way to say it. Yeah, they just don't have any. Vadim Rachenko says, I bet my nuts that Kent can't understand vectors. Yeah, that's probably true. Although, to be fair, I still don't fully understand dot products. Like, I've had it explained to me, and I've used dot products before. But, like, for some reason, they just never actually go into my brain in a way that it just intuitively makes sense as to what a dot product is. They're like, hey, find the dot product of these vectors or whatnot. I'm like, I don't really know what that means. Even though I do sometimes use dot product. Roshida, rock-shaped like dill pickle Keller for $4.99 says, a sine wave with peaks at +1 and -1 doesn't show a reversal? No, it absolutely does. And yeah, that's something that Kent doesn't seem to understand. In fact, when I explain what he's actually saying, I'm usually explaining it in a way that I don't think he would understand, but that's the most charitable interpretation of what he's saying that I can get from like a mathematical or scientific standpoint. Because I'm still being reasonably charitable to Kent, right? Like, I'm still translating his nonsense into terms that could at least be rigorously checked on. Here we go.
Continue here now, talking about the Earth's magnetic field. The Earth's magnetic field is getting weaker. In the early 1800s, a guy named Gauss, G-A-U-S... I don't know how to spell his name. G-A-U-S-S-E or Gauss, I forget.
I think it's just Gauss, but I'm not actually sure either.
I think you're right.
Okay. I'm not an expert at spelling, especially when it comes to names.
Yeah, just one S. Anyway.
No, I think it's 2 S's, isn't it? Chat, help me out. Is it Gauss
Unless
with
it's
2?
Different Gauss that I don't know.
The magnetic
two
field
S's.
strength guy? It's 2 S's?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's 2 S's.
Look, when it comes to proper nouns, I'm not going to hit Kent too hard on like not knowing how to spell a name, right? Because those aren't regular words. Those are, much harder to spell. Roach in a rock shaped like dill pickle color for $4.99 says, sorry, but this whole Kent doesn't understand the concept of negative numbers really, really irks me. It's just so stupid, which I believe is a typo for. It really is. Especially for a guy who claims to have taught math for 15 years. Like, how do you teach math for 15 years and not have a good grasp on negative numbers? Are you Terrence Howard? Is that what's happening right now? Do you think that if we asked Kent whether 1 times 1 should equal 2 or 1, that he would get it right?
I don't know. That's the problem.
My goodness. I'm almost tempted to call him and ask.
Well, I'm not going to call him and ask, but if you did, I would enjoy
So
that.
I'm a little worried about the legal things. Like, I don't know what the deal is with like recordings and all that, and also it's kind of late over there. And I don't want it to be like actionable harassment. But if this show were really early and I knew for a fact what the legal ramifications of recording Kent were, they weren't bad, I'd probably call him. Say, hey Kent, what's 1 times 1? If he says 2, then we know he's into teriology, which is what Terrence Howard actually calls his nonsense. He calls it teriology. Like, oh, come on.
Of course he does.
Like, could you act in a more narcissistic manner than that? Possibly. Is it even comprehensible? Roach in a rock shaped like dill pickle Keller for $1.99 says, remember degaussing your CRT monitor? I actually don't remember having done that myself. I know it's a thing. I assume that was handled by other people in the household, because I didn't do it. But yeah, it is a thing. If you don't degauss it, you get distortions and what. So, Kent does live call-ins on Thursday and Friday. Okay. I'm a little tempted to call him. That would be the second time this year I've called Dinosaur Adventureland. The first time was to get the story on the rattlesnake bite. And yeah. And then I recently called the Creation Museum. Called them last week. See if they still had the raptor display in the hall where they explain the effects of Adam's fall or Adam's sin or whatever.
Do they?
Yes, they do. They still have it.
Nice.
Awesome. We're going to end the poll, by the way. I think it's been going on long enough. Esther Reed for $4.99 says, I mean, if Kent tried to cite you, he'd tell his disciples to call you unsolicited. That's true, but that doesn't mean I'm going to stoop to his level. The recording part might be a problem, though. Yeah, well, that's the biggest thing for me is recording. I'm sure he would have no problem with his various cult members calling me and harassing. But the fact that he has a problem with it is not enough for me to do it to him, because I would prefer to be the better person. So let's see. Have you seen the Northern or Southern Lights? No, 43%. Yes, 37%. Total 19%. 115 votes. Okay. Yeah, that's pretty good. I'm actually surprised that the yes is quite that high. I would have thought it would be a little bit lower. That's pretty cool. Fits of bias sheets rage. Does every Gauss name I've seen was spelled that way with 2? Okay. That's what I thought, but like, would I stake my life on whether or not Gauss has 1 or 2 S's? Absolutely not.
Gauss figured out a way to measure how strong is the Earth's magnetic field. There's
magnetic fields in general, but sure.
many different ways to measure the strengths of magnets. For instance, if you took a magnet and see how many paper clips it'll hold up, to make a string of paper clips, eventually it won't hold the string anymore. It's not strong enough. A stronger magnet will hold a longer string.
Yeah, if you standardize that with a weight of like iron of like individual pieces, that would be a way that you could measure the strength of magnetic field. Yeah, that's fair.
You can get an electromagnet like at a junkyard. The guy flips a switch and electricity goes through this coil and becomes a real strong magnet and picks up a car.
Mm-hmm.
Shuts the switch off, electricity stops flowing, car falls. The electromagnet only works as long as the electricity is running through the magnet.
He's getting this right.
You can do that. You have them on your car if you have an electric door lock. When you hit the switch, it is sending electricity around a coil of wire, creating a magnet just for a second that pulls a metal rod down. When I was in electricity class in high school,
I I'm very skeptical that he had electricity class, but okay.
Made for a project, a golf ball return. You hit the golf ball, it flows into the hole, and it hits a little switch in the hole, which triggers a electric circuit and makes a magnet. I just had a steel rod would go. There's a coil of wire and a steel rod. As soon as electricity went through there, boink, it would come out and hit the golf ball and knock it back out to you.
Okay. Where's this going, Kent?
What a waste of time.
Yeah, Kent, most people's high school electronics projects are probably not going to revolutionize the world. They're not there for you to actually make a useful invention. They're there for you to learn the basics of how electrical engineering works, so that you have a background knowledge about how electricity works. Right? That's the case for all your science fairs and engineering challenges or whatnot in high school. No one's ever going to make the thing. Well, I guess I can't say no one ever, but like the goal is not for you to make the next great invention of our time, right? It's to give you an idea as to how this whole thing works. And yeah, Triceratops Australia is some Latin guy. It says solenoid. Yes, that is in fact the more fancy name for what an electromagnet is talking about. Ben, do you remember solenoids?
Unfortunately, yes.
They're not that bad. What do you have against solenoids?
I don't want to talk about it.
Fair enough. I don't have anything in particular against solenoids themselves. I have things against people who involved me with solenoids at various times. So there's that.
First place, knocking the ball in the hole is a waste of time. But
you know what, Kent? I am kind of with you on your anti-golf stance. Golf is a gigantic disaster for the environment. It wastes huge amounts of water, and it is something that is almost exclusively enjoyed by people who are rich enough to go do other things that are less destructive. So, as far as I'm concerned, we should pretty much shut down all golf courses that aren't already in places where the grass would grow regardless of irrigation. Or just say that you have to play with AstroTurf. No grass. That's slightly more destructive than just not playing golf, but it's less destructive than using up huge amounts of water. You know, there are golf courses in the Phoenix metro area. Arizona is in the middle of a water shortage crisis. They have had to slash the water budget for farmers in Arizona. And yet there are golf courses that are just doing fine. It's not okay. I don't want to just get onto my high horse about how much I hate golf in many cases, but I really am not a big fan of golf as a thing that occurs in most of the United States. There are some places where, like, sure, whatever, it's fine. Like, you know, you're like, oh, I have a golf course in, like, Florida where it's always raining anyway. Okay, great. I don't care that much. Which is also where I get cool footage of alligators walking around on golf courses. It's from Florida. So, you know what, Florida, you get to keep your golf courses so that I get to keep having videos of alligators walking across them.
Right? Okay. But the golf ball returns that way. Just a little magnet, you know, just becomes a magnet momentarily. You can actually shoot a steel rod that way. It's a very...
mini golf courses can be pleasant sometimes. Yeah, and because they're not using up a whole bunch of water, I'm much more okay with mini golf courses, because usually that's just a bunch of like fake grass on a bit of concrete, which, like, that's not more environmentally damaging than other concrete-based like amusement areas, like a skate park or something.
Inefficient way to do it, but it can be done where you have a rod and a coil of wire, you energize it, shoots the thing through. The problem is, when it gets to the middle, as soon as it gets past the middle, it starts pulling it back. So the trick is, as it's coming in, shut your power off so that it'll keep going. Otherwise, it'll go stop in the middle. Which
I appreciate the cartoon sound effects, I guess, Kent. Good job. Although it didn't land as a joke, so we're still taking a drink for it. It's kind of weird, but hey, whatever.
Won't do any good. Okay. As far as shooting it, there's all sorts of other ways more inexpensive ways to propel objects through space. But the Earth's magnetic field, ever since it has been measured by this guy named Gauss, it has been losing strength. It has now lost 6% of its strength in the last 150 years.
Yeah, it's probably correct.
Could the gravitational pull hold the atmosphere in?
What? Well, I mean, that is what holds the atmosphere in. What is Eric on about? What? Okay. Well, maybe if I hit play, I'll figure it out.
Okay.
No, if you have an idea, let's hear it.
Well, I've heard that if you don't have a magnetic field, solar wind will take your atmosphere away.
Yeah, but
Slowly
that's on the
surely.
scale of like billions of years.
But does Eric know that?
He might not. That's true.
Yeah.
But I think he thinks that the primary reason that the air stays near the ground is the magnetic field. I think he thinks that even absent the solar wind, that the magnetic field is what keeps the atmosphere here, which is not true.
Gravity holds the atmosphere in. It has nothing to do with the magnetic field.
Okay, there you go. Kent's got it.
Is gravity, okay.
I don't think gravity and magnetic field are related at all.
Is gravity,
Well, I mean, you couldn't have a planet coalesce to have a magnetic field if you didn't have gravity, because, you know, the Earth isn't, like, chemically bound together. It's gravitationally bound. So without gravity, the Earth just wouldn't exist to have a magnetic field, but they are not, like, directly linked, right? So, Kent's mostly right there, I guess.
at all?
No, gravity's all staying the same as far as we know. Gravity appears to be directly related to the mass of the planet. How many pounds of dirt are here? That doesn't change.
It's not dirt, but yeah, he's right. We'll take a drink.
It's maybe increasing a little as more cosmic dust and stuff falls in, but it's insignificant. So magnetic field and gravitational field are totally unrelated to each other. Some planets have a magnetic field, and some planets and some stars or some moons have a magnetic field, some don't. I don't remember.
I defy Kent to name a single star that lacks a magnetic field. I don't think that's even possible. Pretty sure if it doesn't have a magnetic field, it's not going to be a star anymore. Because remember, stars are made of plasma, which is charged particles, and they're in motion. And when you have a moving charge, you produce a magnetic field. So stars can only exist with magnetic field. If it doesn't have a magnetic field, it's not made of plasma. If it's not made of plasma, it's not a star. That doesn't mean that everything that's made of plasma is a star, but it's being made of plasma is a necessary condition for being a star. Well, primarily made of plasma. I'm sure there are some non-ionized atoms somewhere in the sun. Whatever.
If the Earth has, if the moon has a magnetic field or not, we could look it up. If it does, it's not much of one. Okay. One of the Jupiter's moon, Ganymede, they discovered as they sailed out there past Jupiter, one of its moons has a real strong magnetic field. Most of them don't. They would all have gravity that would be directly proportional to their size. A bigger...
No, their mass, right? Their size usually implies their volume. And while volume is an aspect, the mass is the important part overall. And so, like, you need to figure out both of them to figure out, like, what the surface gravity would be. But as a point source, right, where, like, you're just in orbit at some distance that's significantly above the surface such that you're not going to impact the surface, all that matters is the mass, right? So if you're orbiting, say, Earth at, like, 3 Earth radii out, the exact volume of the Earth, as long as it's small enough that you're not going to impact it, isn't going to matter. Your orbital velocity is basically going to be the same thing, right? So if you're at 3 of what is now Earth radii out, and Earth just expands like a balloon by 50% in volume, that's not going to really affect your orbit any. Because at that distance, you can still basically treat Earth as a point source of gravity. And that is all that matters is the total mass. So while there are certain areas in which the volume also matters, like I said, for surface gravity, once you're far enough away that you're like in orbit or just in interstellar space, like passing by things and being affected by gravity, all that matters is the total mass, because you can treat those masses as point sources that far away. So when Ken says size, if by that he means volume, then no, he's pretty much wrong about that.
Planet would have, or denser planet, more massive planet is the proper word.
There you go. You got there, Kent. You had to go through basically every term that might be related, but you got there eventually.
Would have more gravity, but that would be unrelated to the magnetic field. Okay, the Earth's magnetic field has been declining. As they've studied this data, they said, okay, that means it used to be stronger. Right?
Well, no, not duh, Kent, because you're one of those people who often objects to scientists extrapolating current trends into the past. So here, where you think it might be useful to extend this trend indefinitely into the past, you're just going to assume that that's the obvious thing that we should do. Which is a common thing that we see with creationists, right? They will want to extend into the indefinite past things that we know are not constant, like erosion rates, or the accumulation rates of various minerals into the ocean, or the strength change of the magnetic field of the Earth. Things we know for a fact are not constant, and that we have no good reason to think are constant, even on relatively short timescales. Creationists will say, yeah, let's just extend that back indefinitely. Another one that Kent likes is the recession rate of the moon. We know the recession rate of the moon has changed. We can tell, because we can tell how long months were, because of this thing called tidal crossbedding. And how frequently the tides come in and out is something we can actually see in marine sediment that's preserved. Figure out, hey, how many daily cycles correspond to monthly cycles, or to tidal cycles. We can figure out on the basis of that how long a month was, how long it took for the moon to go around. And if you know the mass of the Earth, and you know the orbital period of the moon, Ben, does that give you enough to figure out the, say, semi-major axis of the moon's orbit?
I think so.
It sure does. Any given semi-major axis is going to have a particular average velocity for that at a particular orbital period for any object in orbit around that center mass. So yeah, we can figure this out. We know it's not constant. But then things that we know are constant, that we don't have a way to vary, and that we have every reason to think have never changed. Things like the fine structure constant, the strength of the strong nuclear force and the weak nuclear force, the decay rate of atoms. Those are things where creationists be like, yeah, but have you considered that maybe it changed in the past? Even the speed of light. Not many creationists are still proposing this, but C decay used to be a popular idea in creationism. And C stands for the speed of light. There were a lot of creationists who thought that the speed of light changed, and that's why we could see distant stars. But the problem is that the speed of light also affects all sorts of other parts of physics. You change C, you change the strength of many, many other forces. And physics just doesn't work at all the right way. And yeah. Fearmonger points out, big mistake assuming the strong force is real. Yeah, that is my big mistake. Yeah, Vadimirchenko says, also ocean salinity. Yeah, that's what I meant. Well, that's included when I was talking about the mineral accumulation time. Because one of the minerals is just, salt. Or salts, I should say. Here we go.
How strong can the magnetic field get before you start to create a problem?
I don't know, Kent. Do you know?
Thomas G. Barnes was...
Sorry?
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there is a number.
A physics, PhD in physics, and taught physics at the University of Texas, El Paso.
Not my favorite city. I've been there. Wasn't terrible, but still, it's kind of meh. Also, I like that their local news is shared with various Nevada cities, because they're closer to many, many more cities in Nevada than they are to any cities in Texas.
I've spoken there several times at the university and in El Paso at different churches. Thomas G. Barnes is, I think, probably like 82 years old now. He's pretty old. Brilliant man when it comes to the Earth's magnetic field. He was considered one of the world's experts on the Earth's magnetic field. He said, the magnetic field of the Earth is declining. Here's the data.
Roshina, rock-shaped like dill pickle teller, for $1.99 says, Kent believes in the debunked higher light theory. Which, yeah, is... I know he said that, and I don't remember exactly how that differs from C decay. If you remember how that differs from C decay, or if it does, please let me know. I don't remember exactly the difference. I'm more familiar with C decay than I am with tired light, assuming they're different things. If they're actually just different names for the same thing, then I'm just more familiar with the name C decay.
He said this shows it cannot be more than 25,000 years old.
Okay. And if the rate of decay were constant, maybe. But, Kent, do you remember when you said that there were fluctuations in the strength of the magnetization of the rocks in the ocean floor? Remember that you said that, Kent. That you're wrong that they're not reversals, but you believe that there were ups and downs in the strength of Earth's magnetic field based on what you said about the ocean floor rocks. which means that if you want to extrapolate this indefinitely back, you're going to have to either come back and say, no, there are no differences in the strength of the magnetization of rocks in the ocean floor around the mid-Atlantic ridge, or you're going to have to retract that you think that this is something we can project infinitely into the past, or indefinitely into the past, I should say. So I'm going to take a drink for Kent contradicting himself, which is not terribly uncommon. All right, it is 8:01. Now, I think you know what that means. Which is that it's time for hour 3 of the No Election Talk Kent with Ben stream. We're going 3 hours tonight, everybody.
Yay!
Yep, we're going another hour. I am currently not at the point where I need a new drink just yet, so we might take a quick break in a little bit. Or if someone gives 50 memberships, I'll just down this drink and go get another one. You know, I'm just saying, if you wanted to. That could be a thing you did. Of course, it's extremely expensive, so I don't actually expect you to.
We'll get into more of that in a minute, but according to Thomas Barnes, the magnetic field of the Earth puts an age limit on the Earth of 25,000 years.
Okay, cool, but Kent, you already know that that's wrong. You have already agreed to something that debunks this.
Now, those who believe in evolution don't want any age limits. They certainly don't want less than 25,000 years. Right?
No, Kent, if there were actually evidence that that's how old the Earth were, then okay. Look, here's the thing. I don't want the Earth to be 4.5 billion years old. Like, that's not a burning desire deep in my bosom. I want to know how old the Earth actually is, and if the actual age is 25,000 or less years, great. Remember, I used to think that the Earth was like 6,000 years old, because I used to be a young Earth creationist. I didn't stop being a young Earth creationist because I didn't like it. I stopped doing it because there wasn't any evidence. Joshua Yeast has just gifted 5 Dapper Dinosaur memberships. Thank you so much. Let's see. Let's take 5 more drinks. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And Benton, I don't know. I think you're going to escape the tutu.
Oh, shucks.
At this rate, we're only going to get to about 75%, not 100%.
That's too bad.
But
Maybe next time.
Escaping the tutu also means that you don't get free pizza.
Oh, that's even worse.
Mm-hmm.
Aw. Oh, well.
You got to have zillions of years to make your theory look good. I think it looks bad anyway, but even with zillions of years. But
you thinking that something looks bad is, like, in my mind, a good point. Like, as a general rule, things that Kent is for, things that Kent is against, I'm probably for. Right? Like, I mean, basically name it. There's very few things that Kent is against that I wouldn't be for. Like, Kent is against treating trans people like humans. I'm for that. Same thing for, say, the rest of the LGBT. Which, I guess I didn't need the T in there, but whatever. Like, he's for treating all those people like subhuman trash. I'm against that. Right? He's for various forms of Christian nationalism. I'm against that. I'm fine with having a nation that has lots of Christians in it, but they should not get to impose their religious values on the rest of the country. Which, we're getting a little bit close to the band topic, so I'll try to pull back from that. But Renee Reborn has just gifted 5 more Dapper Dinosaur memberships, so I want to say thank you very much there, and we will take 5 more drinks. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Here we go.
certainly look really bad without zillions of years. So, factoid. The Earth's magnetic field is getting weaker. I've never had anybody argue with that one. Even the atheists will agree, yes, it's getting weaker.
Right now.
But, they say, that's only because it's getting ready to reverse again. What do you mean again? It never has reversed. So,
Okay, Kent, remember, literally Kent's entire evidence that that's the case was that he just said, nuh-uh, and then pointed out that sine waves don't have to center around 0. That was it. He didn't have a citation, he didn't have an argument, he didn't say that he had done any experiments. He just said, nuh-uh, look, I can put a sine wave anywhere on the y-axis that I want. Which, I mean, yeah, okay, that's true. But so what? That doesn't change where this one was centered, and it was around 0. Dutch Tunicate Demonic Selection for $2 says, celebrating 3 hours with some homebrew mead, with a dapper emoji. But I don't want to take the time to homebrew mead, which means I'm probably never going to get homebrew mead. Also, honey is expensive in bulk. I mean, it's expensive not in bulk, but like if you've looked into like getting a gallon of honey, it's not a cheap thing to get. And to make, mead, you need a lot of honey. And like the cheap stuff is usually like unfiltered, and I don't want to take the time to filter out my own honey. If you don't filter it, then it's full of things like bee parts, because, it's from a beehive. So, yeah. Although, you know what I do think maybe I want to get is some beeswax candles. I love the smell of beeswax candles. They're so nice. And, yeah, I don't know. It's like a subtle, kind of sweet honey flavor scent. Very, very, very nice. If you guys have encountered beeswax candles, you know what I'm talking. Very, 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 like calming, I like. I don't know. Maybe I should put beeswax candles on my wish list.
Do it.
Alright, I'll put beeswax candles on my wish list.
They teach the Earth's magnetic field is reversing because that's the only way they can get out of the problem.
No, Kent. They teach that because it's what's evidently true based on the evidence in the rocks. Because as, RJ or Jackson might say, the rocks were there. Available now on Amazon. Too Young to Feel As Old, who's been a member for 27 months and is at the Seropsid level, says, much love to Dapper, Bent, and the whole community. With 3 AIG are a bag of dicks emoji. We will take a drink, and thank you very much. I really do appreciate that, Too Young to Feel As Old. And also 27 a month, that's quite a while.
The fact is, it's declining. All we've ever measured is it's declining.
Kent, measuring those rocks is itself a measurement of the Earth's magnetic field, because that's the only way you can get that magnetization in those rocks. And you've already agreed that it can both decline and increase in strength. Because that's true regardless of how wrong you are over whether or not it reverses.
Nobody's ever seen it reverse. We don't know how it could reverse.
Doesn't matter. It evidently has, based on our measurements. And even if that's not true, we still know it's fluctuated in strength, based on those same measurements. The way that Kent explains the measurements results in the logical necessity that the Earth's magnetic field can both increase and decrease in strength, and that it has.
If you want to believe it did, that's fine, but that's not science. Psalm 24, verse 1. The earth is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof, the world and they that dwell therein. Then it says in verse 2, He hath founded it upon the seas. What does that mean? Founded means where you put the foundation. He put the foundation of the earth, he founded the earth upon the seas. Okay,
what was the verse there? Did you hear that?
Well, I think it was Psalm 14 something.
I'll listen. We'll go back a little bit.
Yeah.
Psalm
24.
Psalms 24, 1 through 2. No, Kent, it's Psalm 24. It's the 24th Psalm. I hate so much that Kent sucks at the Bible as much as he sucks at Psalms. Like, of all the things for Kent to be bad at, So, first, let's double check something. All right. So, the general Hebrew word for sea, right, is yim. Y-I-M. Or yud mem. Mem? Yud mem. Look, here's the thing. Whenever I start naming letters in any Semitic language, I'm extremely likely to just default to the way that those letters are pronounced in Arabic, because it is by far the Semitic language that I am the most familiar with. So, anyone who's better at Hebrew with me, which is basically going to be anyone who studied any Hebrew ever, please be aware that that is why I have a tendency to say meme instead of mem. Sorry. Roshina, rock-shaped like dill pickle Keller for $4.99 says lava flows also shows the current magnetic field strength and orientation as they... Oh, okay, sorry. the capital A and also threw me. Okay. Lava flows also show the current magnetic field strength and orientation as they cool. Correct. That is very correct. All right. So, let's find out what the Hebrew is over at Psalm 24. I'm assuming we're going Masoretic text numbering instead of Septuagint numbering, because that is what most Protestants use. In fact, as far as I'm aware, most Protestants aren't even aware that the numbering of the Psalms varies between the Septuagint and the Masoretic text. Did you know about that, Kent or Bent?
Only because of you.
Okay, that's
He
fair.
could be, yeah.
Okay, so now in I wanted to check to see whether or not the general word or sea was used, or if it was tehom, and it looks like it is actually the regular word for sea. Okay, so Kent is getting a +1 for me on this one. So Kent, you are correct that it does just say the seas. I was worried that it might say like the great deep. It says old imim, so that's on the sea or on seas. I say the seas, but like that's how we would phrase it in English. So yeah, old imim. Okay, cool. So you know what? I'm going to take a drink for Kent getting this one right. I was worried he was using a translation. He's using the KJV, and I was worrying that the underlying Hebrew was tehom and not im or im. But nope, looks like it's good. Olivia Williams says, still on? Hi, yes, we are going for a third hour today. Although now my drink is mostly water, which means I think it is actually time for a quick intermission because it's mostly water. What's the point? This is a drinking stream in the sense that I drink a cocktail or a beer or something. And plus completely watered down gin and tonic, not that good. It's just... So we'll take a quick break. I won't replay the trailer, the Star Trek Adventures game, but do check that out. All right, here we go. We'll be right back. Next time on Star Trek Lexington. Okay, we are back. And while I was gone, we did have a Dapper to Professional because after saying I wasn't going to play the teaser trailer, it did start to play, so that's my bad. So that's why we were at 50 when before we were at 49. I did take a drink, so feel free to follow through. I did announce it when it happened, so you know, go. I think this is actually the first time that we've double-checked Kent's claims against the original language of the Bible and found that Kent was basically right.
That's not common that he is.
Yeah, no. By which I guess I mean, like, the translators of the King James... Well, the editors of the King James Bible were right. Because remember, the King James Version is not its own translation. It's basically a revision of the Bishop's Bible. And one of the directives from King James was to change the Bible as little as possible in terms of the Bishop's Bible versus the King James Bible. So, yeah, there you go.
The world and they that dwell therein. Then it says in verse 2, he hath founded it upon the seas. What does that mean? Founded means where you put the foundation. He put the foundation of the earth, he founded the earth upon the seas. Strange verse, isn't it? Look at Psalm 136. To him that stretched out the earth above the waters. Now there's another strange verse.
Okay, let's check that one. Right? Because I'm curious. Because the thing is, when it says the waters, the seas, the great deep in English, it's always a little bit curious. Like, does it say, like, what is it? Is it? Oh, no, I can't remember the waters in Hebrew because my brain is like just destroying itself. Does it like mean like Yamim? Does it mean like Om? So let's see. Also, I hate it that again he has Psalms 136. Which then caused me to type it into my damn search bar. Alright. Let's see. What do we have here for Psalm 136? And it's verse 6. Okay. And to him who laid out the earth above the water. Hamayim. Yep. Okay. That's the waters. Okay. Which is pretty generic. Now, what all of this is getting to is, you know, the flat Earth ancient Near East cosmology in which the Earth is sort of like a bubble in the middle of the cosmic ocean that extends above and below, and then, I guess, to around the sides. Oh, and Vishanti says Hamayim right there. Yeah. Well, I also found it, Vishanti. Although I found it online, I didn't pull out my, like, Biblia Hebraica Sutkarencia. I'm not even sure where that is right now. I'm looking around at my desk, and I'm like, I don't see it. I don't think it's within arm's reach of me. I think, you know, I think it might be on that shelf where we put the keys. Here, Bent.
Okay.
I think it might be there. It's a very small book, which is actually kind of annoying because I have to like squint to read the Hebrew, and I'm not very good at reading Hebrew in the first place. So, yeah, I don't. That book doesn't get nearly as much use as it should. Oh my goodness, Vadim Radchenko says last week Dr. Kip's stream. Some nut was saying the KJV is a word-for-word translation from the Greek originals. Oh, geez. Let's just see what that would mean, right? Like, let's get some Greek in here. Okay, we'll go to a famous passage. Like, I want to show you how crazy it is to even say that. Okay. So John 1:1, as you know, it normally starts out in most Christian translations. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, or was with God, and the Word was God. So let's see how it would read if we did it word for word. In beginning was the Word, and the Word was with the God, and God was the Word. It's not quite how you would want to go. He was in beginning with the God. Everything through him came into being, and without him came into not even one that has been made or like created. One that created or was created. Let's see. In him life was, and the life was the light of men. Let's see. And the light in the darkness shines, and the darkness itself not overcame. Came man, having been sent from God, name to him John. I'm sorry, but no translation into English is a word-for-word translation of the Greek. Bent, I'm sure you could follow roughly what was meant by that.
Yeah, but I'm also familiar with the original passage.
Right, and also you recognize that, like, in no way is that a good way to translate the Greek. Like, when I was reading that out,
sounds like broken English.
Yeah. So, no, I'm sorry. There is no English translation that is word for word translating the Greek, nor should there be. Because Greek and English don't share the same grammar, they don't even share the same grammatical categories. It's not something that is or should be done. So, I kind of wish I was there, although, if I'm being honest, by Friday, I'm usually not up for, like, streams about the topics that I cover on my channel. So, it's why I'm often absent from Paul's streams, which kind of sucks because I do think he does really good streams. It's just that I just don't have the energy there for a stream where he's going to talk about nonsense, given how much nonsense I've usually consumed by that point in the week. So,
did he stretch the earth out above the waters?
Mm-hmm.
Now, some people, especially back during the Dark Ages, say 500 years ago or 1,000 years ago, were teaching. Most Christians didn't believe this, but some people were teaching the earth is flat and it's on top of a layer of water because of this verse. Is that what that verse says? No. It doesn't say the earth is flat and is stretched out on top of a layer of water. I think it does say he stretched out the earth above the waters. So there was water under the earth.
Right, but you don't realize why that's a problem for you? That's not how the earth has ever worked. It's not physically possible for the earth to work that way. Apparently, that's just not a problem for Ken.
That doesn't mean under the earth like this.
No, it literally does mean that, because there was no concept of a globe earth when Genesis was being written. No one had thought of that. It wouldn't be for hundreds of years until anyone came up with the idea of the globe earth.
Under the earth. Under the part we're standing on. Okay? A layer of water under the crust of the earth. That's the water, I believe, that came shooting out at the time of the flood.
Oh my goodness, take a drink for Hydroplate. So here's the thing about that. Hydroplate theory assumes that there is there's these subterranean oceans, right? The problem is, one, there's no way for the Earth to get like that apart from a miracle. But again, since the whole idea is supposed to be that it's for a miraculous event in the first place, then whatever, I guess it can be miraculous. The bigger problem is that it's not stable. It will almost immediately invert that pressure disorder. Because one of the things that you find about Earth is that, at its most basic level, Earth is basically a spherical density tower. And better late and here than not, Gladstone, for $10, says, "Phew, made it with some time left. Hey, Dapper, Bent, and everybody, thank you so much for the special episode. Kent talking about the waters, huh? Got it. And we will, of course, add that to our total. So, thank you very much. We need to get at least 8 more %. I think you can tell why. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, the Earth is basically a density tower. So in the top layers, right, we have the lightest stuff, the gases and whatnot. And then below that, we get to things like the water in the lowest lying areas, and then the denser dirt and rock and whatnot. And then we get the slightly denser, mostly silicate but heavier and heavier metals mantle. And below that, we get to the liquid outer core, which has even more dense stuff. And then we finally get to the densest part, the inner iron core. And you might say, yeah, but Dapper, there's gold and platinum and whatnot. Okay, yeah, it's not a perfect density tower. Okay, but it's still overall basically a density tower. If you don't know what a density tower is, it's this little science demonstration that you can do, right? Where you pour a bit of like alcohol, a bit of dyed water, a bit of different kinds of oil, and then you can place different objects in there, right? Like you might put like a small piece of fruit and a screw and a piece of styrofoam and a ping pong ball. And they all settle out according to their density in the tower. Right? Earth is basically that same way. But if you have a subterranean ocean, that means that you have a persistent, high-density thing, namely rock, above a lower-density thing, namely water. That will not persist. The water will find its way through any even tiny imperfection in the top surface of that in very short order, which means that there was no flood option. The very idea of the flood having a before time is itself directly miraculous the whole way through. If the Earth somehow found itself in that position, it would almost immediately invert that density problem. Which means that the flood was inevitable. It doesn't have anything to do with Adam's sin or with the wickedness of man. The flood was already going to happen no matter what. It wasn't a judgment. It wasn't God saying naughty, naughty. It was just the inevitable outcome of hydroplate theories were true. Which I don't think is the theological position that Kent would take. I don't think Kent thinks that the flood was inevitable from the beginning of the world. And that if, no matter whether or not Adam and Eve had sinned, and no matter how wicked or not people had got before the flood, that it would have happened. He doesn't want that. But that is the inevitable result of hydroplate theory. So, I mean, I guess you could be Calvinist about it and say, well, it was all preordained from the beginning, so it doesn't matter. Okay, cool, I guess. But I'm pretty sure that Kent is a free will Baptist and not a Calvinist. So, he doesn't have that retreat. Also, of course, if you think that God generally has dickish tendencies, if you're a Calvinist, it's even worse.
Look at Genesis chapter 7 and verse 11. In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, in the 17th day of the month, the same day were all the fountains of the great deep broken up.
Hey, what's the next bit? And the windows of heaven were opened. Kent doesn't actually think there are windows in heaven. This is a direct reference to the ancient Near East cosmology in which the Earth is flat, built in the midst of the great deep, the Tehom, which is related again to like Tiamat from other ancient Near East mythologies, which is a great chaos serpent, which itself is thematically connected to Leviathan, found elsewhere in the Bible, including in a partial creation myth in one of the Psalms. And the windows of heaven are literally gates that God uses to let in precipitation. They're physical holes in the firmament, the dome over the flat Earth. Bits of Biasheet's Rage has joined the channel at the Seropsid level. Thank you very much, everybody. Send all sorts of tetrapods to welcome Bits of Biasheet's Rage to the channel memberships, which they were already a part of, but now they've upgraded to Seropsid.
And the windows of heaven were opened. It's very important you notice the sequence here. Hey, can Andrew bring me a glass of water, too, when you get time? No.
I think that is the first time I've ever heard Kent actually use the name of his other son out loud. In case you guys don't know, Kent has 3 kids. He's got Marlissa, he's got Eric, and he's got Kent Andrew. Kent Andrew is a special needs, man. He's not a kid anymore. And Kent has a history of ignoring his existence consistently. I think he's the one that he means when he says that he has one of each, when he's talking about his kids, saying he's got a boy and a girl, and he's got 3 kids, and he's got one of each. I think he does that to dehumanize Kent Andrew as a joke. I can't prove it. However, I also know that when Kent Andrew visited Dinosaur Adventureland, the only of Kent's 3 kids who will step foot on the property after he got out of prison, that Kent did his best to ignore his existence the entire time, and Kent Andrew left in tears.
It's really sad.
Yeah. So if you were ever wondering just how big of an asshole Kent is, he's that big of an asshole. He's the one who is disappointed that he had a special needs kid, and who will to this day ignore that kid, even though it's the only one of his 3 kids who has ever even tried to have a relationship with him post-prison. That's Kent Hovind.
Notice the sequence here. First, the fountains of the great deep were broken up. Then, the windows of heaven were opened.
Okay?
Some people say, how can it rain for 40 days?
I don't. I'm perfectly fine with the rain. It's such a minor problem compared to all the other problems with the flood. Like, sure, it's a problem, and like you can't have global precipitation. Like, you just can't. But like, it could rain in like where the arc is for 40 days. Whatever. I mean, I've been to Washington. I've lived in Washington. I've experienced far more than 40 days in a row of rain. Far more. When I got there, it was the beginning of a record-breaking streak of rainy days. I think it was like 100 days or something crazy like that it rained every single day. It didn't rain every single second of the day, but it rained on like 100-something consecutive days. First time I got there. So like, yeah, no, I don't have a problem with the 40 days of rain. That's fine. And if it's the stories being told more or less from like Noah's perspective, it just means it rained there. Okay, fine. That's great. No problem with that.
Flood the world. Here's typically what an atheist will do. Okay, a guy called me today.
You know, we're going to drink for the false dichotomy that it's creationists, young Earth creationists, and atheists. That's where it is.
Hey, talking about this. He said Mount Everest is 29,000 feet high. I said, yep, you're right. He said, in order for it to rain that much, it would have to be, X number of inches of rain per day for 40 days. And it can't rain that much. The atmosphere won't hold that much. Plus, as atmospheric moisture turns to water, it releases heat.
That's true.
See, when you turn water into moisture, you add heat. You take water, turn it to steam, you boil it. You have to add energy. When the steam condenses back to water, it releases the energy.
I mean, yeah, that's basically it. It's a little bit more complicated. Hey, Becca Justiniano has also joined the channel memberships, and this time at the tetrapod level. Once again, please send some tetrapod emojis, or maybe some good hardworking sessile tunicates. Not those darn pelagic tunicates. I'm going to slightly break my own rule. Sessile tunicates are the kind of tunicates that pelagic tunicates don't.
That is called the latent heat of condensation.
Ooh, that's fancy words from Kent.
Releases heat.
I'm impressed.
And he said that much moisture to produce that much rain to cover Mount Everest would produce so much heat, it would completely destroy the Earth from the heat.
I mean, there are other sources of heat, including from Kent's hydroplate idea. Well, it's not his, but like he ascribes to it. Like, heat from the rain is one of the smaller sources of heat when it comes to things like just the... Because think about this, right? Kent believes that the entire crust of the Earth was suspended above a large ocean that had enough volume to flood the entire Earth. Think about how much potential energy that is for the entire crust of the Earth to be suspended over an ocean. And again, Kent thinks that in the course of about a day, that was all released as the crust collapsed and the ocean water shot out. All of that potential energy is going to be converted into kinetic energy in the water and then to thermal energy as that water comes back down. That's a lot of energy. I don't care how much energy the rain has. Think about how much energy that would be. We could probably calculate it. Like, let's see. See if we can do math. I know. Who wants to do math, right? Okay, so let's see. Mass Earth crust. Let's see what we get here. Okay, 10 to the 20, 2.77 times 10 to the 22nd. I'm just going to round it to 2. Right? So we've got, let's see. Open up my calculator here. So we're just going to say 2 times 10. Oh, wait, no. Did that wrong. 2 times 10 to 22nd. That's in kilograms. Okay. And then we're going to see, like, I'm going to go with for at least 100 meters in height for this ocean, right? It's almost certainly much, much, much taller than that, but I'm being nice. So, check the potential energy formula. So, let's see. Potential energy is gravitational potential energy, which is yeah. So let's see. times the height. We're double checking here. All right, and can you double check the value of the gravitational constant?
Let me check here. 9.8 meters per second squared.
No, that's gravitational acceleration due at Earth's surface. We want little g.
6.67 times 10 to the minus 11. That's a big G.
Yeah. Okay, so we are looking at 1.334 times 10 to the 14th kilojoules. That's a lot of potential energy. And that's with me rounding down the mass of the Earth's crust and also vastly underestimating the height that it would have to fall. So Kent's hydroplate theory, which again isn't his, but whatever, it's Walt Brown's, we're looking at a very conservative minimum, releasing 1 times 10 to the 14th kilojoules. That's a lot. That's a whole heck of a lot. That's more than enough to boil all that water away. Goodness. Thanks, math. You think, Kent, the physics and math teacher, you think at some point he would have just done some ballpark back of the envelope calculations on this, right? But no, he never has. I'm gonna take a drink for just Kent never even doing a sanity check on the hydroplate theory. Oh, apparently. And better late than not, Gladstone says, I vaguely remember another Dapper Dinosaur video with Kent saying Ken Andrews' name. You said the same thing. It was the first time you heard him saying it. Which video heck if I... All right, fair enough. It's not the first time I've heard him say it. It's probably the second or third time. So, sorry, Kent. Except that I'm not actually sorry because, I mean, you're the guy who's still emotionally abusing your special needs. Which, like, not okay. There's no excuse for that. So... All right, here we go.
You're absolutely right. See, they do all the right calculations about how many joules of energy and how many, how much.
Why don't you do any of the calculations for your own damn model? The one you believe. I just did a quick back of the envelope, and you're like, well, maybe you made a decimal point error. Okay, great. What if I say it's 1.3 times 10 to the 12th? Giving you a couple free orders of magnitude. It's not a whole lot better. Oh my goodness. I just can't. I'm taking a drink for the ridiculous amount of hypocrisy of Ken. Like, well, I mean, they did the math, but... Ken, you didn't even get to the point of doing the math. I don't think you can do the math.
Heat and all this stuff. But it's all based on a faulty assumption. Did the water have to cover Mount Everest?
Doesn't matter. My calculation didn't involve any kind of Mount Everest anything. And also, I don't think that the story of the flood is that all of the water was from precipitation. So I think that's where you should just go.
No. Mount Everest was under the water. How high were the mountains how high were they before the flood? Was Mount Everest even there before the flood? We don't know any of that, okay?
Yeah, but Kent, we do know what the basics of hydroplate theory are, which means that regardless of the latent heat of vaporization from the rain, we can get the potential energy of the Earth's crust. And I went... By estimating 100 meters tall, I almost certainly gave you more than one free order of magnitude. And it's still way too much heat.
1 drop of water will cover the Earth a mile deep. Or 1 drop of water will cover the Earth if you spread it thin. And there's enough water right now in the oceans to cover the Earth about 1.5 miles deep.
Yeah, if the Earth had zero topology. But let me check. Hey, Bent. Does the Earth have, like, hills and valleys and rivers and whatnot?
Yeah, it does. And
are you sure?
We know Kent's wrong because the entire world isn't covered in water.
Oh, yeah, there's that, too.
Yeah.
Wait, I'm not currently...
No.
I guess
you might feel like it, but you're not.
I guess that explains why my lungs are continuing to work. Yay for lungs.
Yeah, they are pretty useful.
The Earth is 70% underwater. I mean, there's an awful lot of water out there.
That the Earth is currently mostly underwater doesn't mean that there's currently enough water to flood the rest of it. Because if there were, it would, and it's not. Like, imagine if someone came up to you and said, "Hey, look, I know I owe you $1,000, but I gave you $700, which means you know I have enough to give you $1,000," and then they just walked away. I feel like you might want your $300 back from that guy, and that him saying that is not sufficient for you to say, like, well, I guess he gave me enough money. Roshina, rock shaped like dill pickle Keller for $1.99 says, lakes are a lie. True, they're fake. All bodies of water besides the ocean are fake, and the ocean is literally everywhere. Oops, I just screwed up the counter. So Dapper's a professional.
I flew back over to Pacific. You remember coming back from Australia? You know, that's a long flight. I mean, it was hour after hour after hour, and the pilot came out and he said, "Folks, we've got a 200-mile-an-hour tailwind. We're going 750 miles an hour. I just thought you'd like to know." That's the fastest I've ever gone.
Okay.
700, that's past the speed of sound. Of course, we were in the wind, so we were not breaking the sound barrier. But even at that incredible speed, it was many, many hours just to get across the Pacific. So I told Brian, my computer guy in my office, I said, "Brian, the Pacific Ocean is huge."
Yeah.
And in his typical wit, he always thinks several levels beyond everybody else, you know. He says, "Yeah, that's just the top of it." Wow. What a thought. It was brilliant. That was just the top of it. There's just an awful lot of water out there.
Okay.
So, when you figure that all the fresh water in the world, all the lakes, all the rivers, there's a lot of water there. It's about, not even 1/2% of the water in the world.
Get to a point,
I forget the number now. It's like 99.5% salt water.
Yeah, Kent, no one cares how much fresh water is. It doesn't matter to the question of could you flood the Earth with the water that is available. It doesn't matter what proportion of it is fresh or what proportion of it is ice or what proportion of it is ocean. The question is there enough in total? It could be 30% fresh and that still wouldn't answer the question. It could be 0% fresh. That still wouldn't answer the question.
In the world.
Is there really a decline in the amount of water? I mean,
there's a decline in the amount of usable water. There can't be a decline in the water.
I mean, I guess you could take the water to space, but, like, that's not happening in bulk. So, like, okay.
Right.
Is that something that we really need to worry about right now?
Well, in some areas it becomes a serious problem. You know, some areas are using water faster than they can get it. Southern California doesn't get much rain. I mean, there's been talk, like for Africa, some of the Arab states where it's just extremely dry, especially along this coast of Africa, there's been talk of getting ice.
The east coast of Africa isn't exactly well known for lots of Arabic states. I mean, like Ethiopia, not Arab. Eritrea, not Arab. Like, no. You're thinking North Africa. Even then, the degree to which they're Arab is variable, right? Like, Berbers are still a thing.
Icebergs from Greenland, dragging them down with boats and letting them melt, because fresh water floats on salt water. Salt water is denser. Let the iceberg melt and pump the water off the top. That's how desperate they are. Other areas, like last night around here, are plenty of water. Washed away the sod we put out here. You guys get rain over at your place? Man, I mean, I don't know how much we got, but it was a lot. Anyway, it's important to note, though, that the flood was not caused by the rain. Look what it says. The fountains of the great deep were broken up, and the windows of heaven were opened, and the rain was upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. Later we'll see the water kept coming up for 150 days. Well, if the water comes up for 150 days, it's not all coming from rain. Right? It came from inside the earth. The water that used to be under the crust of the earth came to the surface. Now, if you take a nice big juicy grape, set it up.
I don't ever want to hear Kent Hovind say nice big juice. Ever. I could go the rest of my entire life without ever hearing him say that again, and it would be great.
The sun, let it dry out. The moisture inside the grape leaves.
Yeah?
The skin of the grape stays the same size.
I mean, it stays the same surface area, wrapping around a much smaller volume, so... Okay. Actually, I'm not even sure it stays the same size. It very well might shrink.
Only it wrinkles up, right? If there was water under the crust of the Earth, and it came to the top, the crust would fall down a little bit.
Hey, yeah, it would. It's almost like we already mentioned that, and then we did a quick back-of-the-envelope calculation as to how much, potential energy that would be, and that would all have to convert into thermal energy. Weird. Kent, you ever going to talk about that fact? No, probably not.
Causing a slight wrinkling effect. Same surface area now has to be wrinkled up in some of the waters on top in big puddles that we call oceans. It just came to the surface, that's all. Walt Brown's book, In the Beginning, has a really excellent section about what he calls his hydroplate theory. He thinks when God made the earth, there was certainly water under the crust of the earth. When it came shooting to the surface, it came out along cracks. The earth cracked up like an eggshell. I saw a slow-motion picture that somebody did once of a balloon getting popped by a needle. They got to take these cameras and run them, a zillion frames per second and then play it back real slow, okay?
Yes, Kent, that's how slow motion works. Do you think at some point he's going to get to a point here?
No, definitely not.
Okay.
And it showed the hole in the balloon, and the crack actually went around the balloon. Of course, our eye can't see it, but with the slow-motion camera, it was really cool. You could watch the crack race around the balloon. Same thing happens during an earthquake. The crack will actually move across the earth, sometimes at 2,000 miles an hour. This picture here shows Walt Brown's concept of what he thinks the earth was like when the fountains of the great deep were broken open.
Yeah?
He says the cracks, as the water is shooting out, would get wider and wider just from simple erosion.
I mean, yeah, because at this point, you're forcing all this through a tiny little nozzle, proportionally speaking, with all of that, 10 to the 14th kilojoules worth of energy pushing on the water. It's going to be hypersonic, Kent. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of frickin' erosion.
Water shooting up. Plus, it's like when you uncork a bottle of pop if you shake it up first and then uncork it, once it starts to go, it starts going faster and faster. I've never tasted any champagne, but they say that does the same thing. You see the guys, when they win the race, they pop the cork and the champagne goes shooting out, okay?
Yeah, and that's far less energy that's keeping that in there.
The pressure of the weight of the rock on this water would cause it to squirt up through the top.
True.
As it goes up, it's going to go real high. He thinks, 10 or 20 miles into the atmosphere.
Actually, he thinks that the ejecta from Earth from this actually caused literally every crater in the entire solar system. So, yeah. Apparently the Earth was just flinging rocks at the moon, at Mercury, at Mars. Not so much at Venus, mysteriously. Which, hey, Walt Brown, why doesn't Venus have a bunch of craters on it compared to the other rocky bodies in the solar system? What's up with that? Why is that? Was Venus just out that day? Not sure.
Along the way, it's going to tear pieces off the side of the crack, and the crack's going to get wider. Here's his concept, some pictures from Walt Brown's book here in the beginning. The water shooting up from under the crust of the earth. As the crack raced around the earth, the 10-mile thick roof of overlying rock opened up like a rip in a tightly stretched cloth. Water exploded with great violence out of the 10-mile deep slit, which wrapped around the earth like a seam of a baseball. As the crack gets wider and wider, eventually it reaches a point where the layer of rock underneath, which is called the basalt, would bulge up. He uses an interesting illustration. If you take a mattress and squeeze it from the...
Remember when Kent was supposed to be answering the question if there was enough water on Earth to flood the Earth?
It feels like so long ago.
Yeah, and during this entire time, he hasn't even come close. Kent, here's what I want. I want you to give me a volume of water that you think it would be required to flood the Earth. Give me your reason for why you think the topology of the Earth was low relief enough. And then show me that that number is lower than the current, well, is equal to, or lower than, the current volume of water on Earth. That's it. I don't need a long tirade about Walt Brown's physically impossible hydroplate model that ignores the very basic fact that potential energy exists. I don't need that. I just want a few numbers. But Kent, the math teacher, has he given us a single number yet?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think so either. Which is kind of infuriating, if I'm being honest.
ends. If you push from the ends, pretty soon the mattress will bulge up in the center, or a spring like this picture here shows. Okay, if it's compressed from the ends but there's weight on top, it can't bulge up. That's why most springs that are under compression, you put them in a tube so they can't bulge out someplace. But if the Earth had a layer of basalt and a layer of rock on top with water in between,
Basalt is a rock, but whatever.
as the rock on top gets farther apart, the basalt is going to bulge up. Basalt is relatively soft, half-melted rock. As the basalt lifts up then into that opening crack, it's going to cause the continents to slide away.
Okay, so you do think that there's been some kind of drift of the continent. Because earlier you spent a while telling us why you thought that wasn't true. So this is at least the second time, Kent, that you're directly contradicting your earlier statements. So I'm going to take a drink for that. One of the common aspects of pseudoscience that we see across pseudoscience, whether it be anti-vaxxers, whether it be creationists, flat earthers, electric universe theory guys, mud flood people, any of these things, right? Crystal healing, homeopathy. One of the consistent things we see across pseudoscience is that there are always ad hoc ideas thrown around to solve various problems that, while if the idea were true, sure, it would solve that one problem, but it contradicts your ad hoc explanation for other problems, right? So get things like, well, hydroplate theory would explain things like, seafloor spreading and all this stuff. Whereas earlier, you were saying that you didn't think the continents had spread. For some reason, I don't even know what the reason was. Right? And we also get things like that on, say, like, flat Earth. Well, say, like, well, why do we always see the sun as it is? And it's like, well, you will have your personal dome and your own personal sun. Like, okay, but your explanation for how seasons and days work requires an objectively placed sun, so that doesn't work. And it's one of the key features of pseudoscience. If you see an idea that does this, that uses ad hoc explanations for various problems in the hypothesis or the theory or whatever it is, that are contradictory to other such explanations, that are really, that is a really good indicator that what you're looking at is pseudoscience and not actual science. Debate Hub says, made it to the rendering phase. Wish me luck. Well, rendering is always a pain in the ass, so good luck.
They're going to keep sliding based on several factors. How steep is the ground? How much water is still left to lubricate it, because that water is leaving all the time. Eventually, enough water has left that it comes screeching to a halt. In some areas...
Which, by the way, is now adding frictional energy on top of the potential energy. So what Kent is doing here is he's making his own heat problem worse, regardless of the latent heat of vaporization from the extensive rainfall. I'm willing to ignore that. but he's now adding in basically all the friction from whatever he thinks the initial state of the continent to their current state.
If it bulged up real slow, it would slide off real slow. Now, it's not just sliding off into nothing. I mean, the Earth had a solid crust. As it slides off somewhere else, it's wrinkling up. Like during a car accident, you know, when your front bumper moves in toward the windshield, the metal has to wrinkle up.
Okay, we're done with this for now, because it is like 8:57 here, and it's whatever time it is there for you guys. All right, well, thank you so much. I feel like I didn't see anyone violate the rules in the chat. I'm sure one or two people may have. I don't know. I wasn't, watching the chat with the full intent. I had to pay attention to Kent and whatnot. I want to say first, thank you to everyone who didn't violate the rules about no election talk. I really do appreciate it. Let's take a look at what is coming up soon on this channel, as well as on Top Hats Off, and anything that Bent's up to. Bent, do you have anything to talk about for the next week or so? It's coming up?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I have band practice on Saturday night, so
Band
that'll
practice.
be fun.
Is there a way people can tune into that?
Yeah, just show up and you can listen in.
Want to give people where to show up?
I don't feel like doxing my buddy.
No? So they can't
I don't want to
really...
give them my address. So.
You can't really do anything about it.
Yeah, I mean, you could guess, though. There's only so many houses.
That's true. All right, well, I guess you could show up at a random house to see if Bent's there. I don't recommend it, though. That might be like criminal trespass or something. I'm not a lawyer, though. So, do with that what you will, my audience. Let's take a look at what is coming up here on the channel. So, the next big thing is on Thursday. Yeah, that's it, Thursday. We are going to be airing Pan-Creationist Logic. Frank Turek is Clueless Part 2. So, if you liked Frank Turek Part 1, which I can tell that a lot of you did, come hang out for that one. It'll be a good time. We're going to just continue on with that same talk. He's going to get even more annoyed at Greg Kukl, which is fun to watch, if I'm being honest. So that'll be at 11 a.m. Pacific, which is 2 p.m. Pacific. Sorry, 2 p.m. Eastern. There has been a change because we went from, y'all went from daylight savings time to not daylight savings time, which is annoying. Stop doing that, rest of the world. Don't do it. It's dumb. Then on Friday at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern, over on Top Hats Off, we're going to be doing Star Trek Adventures with the new next episode, Splinters of Fire, which you've been seeing multiple instances of the teaser trailer for. So hang out with us. That's going to have Chesh in it. It's going to have Tiri Rana in it. It's going to have Zarna Renkar in it. It's going to have Ziralon, Craig from FTFE, Chesh, me. So, it's a good time. Then on Saturday at what is probably going to be 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern, there should be another Dapper Reacts. I have invited Vishanti back on, and she has indicated that she's probably good for that. And we're going to be taking a look at a video. This is actually the first part of a DVD series that Answers in Genesis released back in 2014. Only looking at episode 1 of that because the rest of it is behind a $74 paywall, and there's absolutely no way I'm giving them $74. So there's that. I expect that to only be a 1-episode thing, and then the next Dapper Reacts will be about something different. It might be that we go over one of Vishanti's old creationist books. That might be fun. So that's not a guarantee, though. But then on Tuesday, we'll be back for Kent with Bent. That will be Kent with Bent 150, Sins of the Hovind. I don't know why there's a weird title on that. I'm going to have to fix that. I blame... Actually have a reason to, so I'm going to do it. So yeah, I think that covers it for the next week or so. I hope everyone has a safe rest of the week. Hope everyone has a safe rest of the end of democracy. Bye, everybody. Have a great rest of dystopia. Hey, before you leave, I just want to take a second to thank my patrons and channel members, especially those pledging $20 or above. Ben Tovind, Thurevara, Tapioca Weasel, Whispers, Elron Teller, Ian Chen, Calvin Brostick von Manen, Landon Knoll, Mabbity Babbity, Sphincter of Doom, Flawless, Edwin M., North Texas Fossils, John Ackerman, and Strawberry Vein. It's because of my channel members and patrons whom you're seeing on screen that this channel can stay afloat. Without you, it would all shut down. If you want to join the team, there's a link to join the channel below this video, and there's a link to join the Patreon in the description. On the Patreon, you can get a 10% discount for pledging annually, and either way, you get early access to virtually all of my scripted videos, often 3 to 5 months before they come out for the general public. Thanks for watching.